To proceed. Welcome one, welcome all. Mr. Manager, how are we doing today?
Well, we're doing good, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And might I suggest that though we always show on your agenda city council briefings, and we have first scheduled the appointment process discussion, we do have some outside visitors today, and if you would like to maybe switch around, and we'll do the first briefing on the managers, the Census 2020 complete count, and we could handle that, and our visitors could go ahead and go, and then we'll entertain a lengthy discussion about the position vacancy.
Okay, with the permission of council, if that's okay, we'll move forward with that.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for your indulgence. And so, as you can see on your agenda, it is time to start thinking about preparing for the 2020 census.
Time flies when you're having fun.
And so, before I introduce our guests and this topic, I would like to introduce to the City Council our new Director of Planning, Bobby Tahan. And Bobby Tahan,
Welcome.
Bobby is a Tallwood graduate, Norfolk State graduate, ODU graduate, and he has been serving the sister city of Norfolk as the Deputy Planning Director and Zoning Administrator over there for almost a decade now. And
Where's that?
Pardon me?
Where's that?
Our sister city, Norfolk.
Not familiar.
Yeah, I understand. Yes, sir. But we're very fortunate to have someone who has worked his way through all the positions associated with planning department, and to be able to bring him back here to his home city and be able to serve us going forward in a time where stormwater understanding, stormwater excellence is a critical prerequisite to being able to help us with our future endeavors. And I'm very pleased to say that Bobby comes here with an excellent knowledge about what sea level rise and recurrent flooding is, and he'll be a great asset. So, council, your new
Welcome,
planning.
and your first name has a ring to it. What could I tell you? Thank you very much.
And so I want to also take a moment to acknowledge Jolilda Saunders. Jolilda has served as our interim planning director after Barry left. And Jolilda is also comes to us having been the 2010 census point of contact, subject matter expert for the city. And so we're fortunate to still have her on staff, and so she's going to lead us out in this discussion and introduce our speaker and help us through this process over the next year or two. So,
Thank you. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. I think I'm proud to say that the first census I worked on was in 1980 with the town of Hilton Head Island. I worked with the census in 90 in Virginia Beach, in 2000 in Virginia Beach, and 2010. And those decades just seem to go by so fast. But here we are again, and we are here today to remind council and to kick off the effort related to the census and how important the census is. And so we have some guests with us from the Census Bureau, and they're going to walk us through the census like we've never done it before. In the process of getting ready for today and just trying to understand the mayor's complete count and what we've done before, I relearned that the first complete count committee happened for the Census Bureau. It began in the Census Bureau in 1969. And so there is a promotional campaign associated with the census. We've got to convince our millennials especially, and convince our undercounted populations especially, that it's important for them to complete their census forms. And this year is going to be the first time we've done it in some of the ways we're going to do it. So with no further introduction, I'd like to introduce first Colin Lewis and then Raquel Sapita, and this is Kevin Kriegsvold, who are going to lead us through our presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Again, I'm Kevin Krigsel with the United States Census Bureau. I'm going to get through this quickly. I'm going to just reference some of the slides here, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them for you. So again, let me first say you're in very capable hands with Jalilda. She's incredible. So we're off to a great start in Virginia Beach with Jalilda. So I'm going to give you just some brief background on what the census is all about, why we do it, talk a little bit about the low response score areas, talk about job opportunities we're going to have, and then forming a complete count committee. So first and foremost, the census happens every 10 years, primarily for the apportionments of seats of Congress. But one of the most important things perhaps for Virginia Beach is the fact that federal dollars are given or directed to communities based on census numbers. So about $675 billion every year is distributed based on census numbers. So it's vitally important that we count every single person in this community. We don't have exact numbers of how much that, if you have someone who's not counting not filling out their form, how much that comes back, is not coming back into the community, but the generic number is about $2,000. A lot of cities, Baltimore says about $1,800. A lot of tribal communities say about $3,000 because they rely so heavily on federal monies. But so if we take that $2,000 number, if only 1,000 people don't fill out their form in Virginia Beach, that's $2 million over the first year. Over the 10-year period, that could be up to $20 million of federal money not coming back into the community. So things are like school lunch programs, roads, hospitals, any number of things. So we need to make sure that everybody fills out their form. This is very small. I know just 50 ways that census data is used and goes. So businesses use it, of course, for when they're deciding on whether or not they're going to come into community. A lot of different things here. This you have access to this PowerPoint if you want to look at these more clear, in depth. Just going to quickly talk about what we're doing now. So in the past, what would happen is a mailer would come to your home, you'd fill it out, send it back. We're trying to do things electronically this time around, so we're going to have first and foremost, a URL. So when the form comes in the mail, there will be a URL on there. We're asking people to go online, fill out their form. There's also perhaps going to be a QR code for phones. 92% of people use smartphones now. There's going to be a telephone number that people can call, and someone on the other end of the line will actually fill out the form for them. And then we also have, of course, the mail-in, and then our last effort is having our door knockers, our enumerators, go out and knock on people's doors. But we want to prevent that as much as possible. So that's one of the reasons why we're here, to try to get help, getting socializing the idea that the census is coming, that everybody needs to fill out their form. We're going to do the counting. We just need help from you for promotion. So I want to talk a little bit about your low response score areas. So this is a map that we've developed. It's called ROAM, the Response Outreach Area Mapper. This is public information. Just go to census.gov ROAM, and you can see this. So you can see here Virginia Beach. I just pulled up this list here. Anything in dark blue are areas that are areas of concern, and the lighter the color, the areas we're less concerned with. So I just pulled up a couple areas that are more problematic. So this census tract 44.8.05. You can see their low response score, 31.8%. So that's 31% of that group of the total population of 3,400. Those people are not filling out their form. We're predicted not to fill out their form quickly. So that's going to mean a lot of more effort in our part, knocking on doors, getting people to fill the form, and also potential loss of income or federal dollars back here for the community. There's just a bevy of information that we provide in this ROAM form. You can see it talks about like multiple unit housing there, 33% of people, and there are 10 plus housing unit, vacant houses 11.4. So that gives you an idea of how to target that area. Specifically, you know this area better than we do, so we're going to need help trying to figure out how to get those people in those communities to fill out their form quickly. Another one I pulled up, 27.9%, and the total population of that census tract, 7,300 people are not filling out their form. So again, just keep that $2,000 bogey in the back of your head, that if people are not filling out the form, that's a potential loss of income into the city. One of the things we've found is that people are especially now, they're worried about privacy and confidentiality. We at the Census Bureau take an oath. We are not allowed to provide any personal information to anybody. So we know that people are going to be afraid to fill out their form, but you know, I can go to jail for 5 years. We can go to jail for 5 years, $250,000 fine if we provide any personal information. So we're not giving any information to ICE, to the police, to the FBI, to housing authorities, anything like that. So that's one of those things we need help getting the idea out that they need to fill out their form because they're, even if somebody is illegal here, they're using your services. They're using your roads, hospitals, schools. So they need to fill out their form so that that money comes back into the community.
Are you going to go into the jails?
Yeah, we have something called the group quarters. In that we actually go to the jail. So the jail numbers, the people that are in the jails, that gets counted towards your numbers. So that's a good thing. So we're talking about we're hoping that you can help form a complete count committee. And let me just get to this next slide here. This is generically what a complete count committee looks like. And what this is, again, we're going to do the count, but what we need help is getting the idea out to the troubled communities that this is important to Virginia Beach. So this is just an example of some of the types of people that might be on the complete count committee. I think Jalilda has got a good handle on this already, so she can probably talk to you about that a little bit further. But you can choose to do this or choose not to do it. There is also something you can do as far as subcommittees to get even deeper into the communities that you want to get into.
Question, do the military that live on base get counted as their home of record, where they're legally their domicile is, or they
No.
counted where they're temporarily residing?
Where you are on April 1st, 2020 is where you get counted.
So if they're on a ship,
They get counted. There's a
ship's deployed, is it counted the same?
yeah, it is. They get counted.
If the ship is stationed here, they get counted on the ship for us.
Yep.
Okay, and so if their family's somewhere else, they get counted where their
If
family is?
their family is somewhere else, their family gets counted. It's for the address, for their address.
All right, thank you.
Where they spend the night.
Right. April 1st, 2020. So again, we're looking for outreach and promotion. We're going to do the hard work of all of the counting. We just need help getting the word out that this is very important to the community, again, because of that potential loss of income. Here's our timeline. We are opening what's called an area census office here in Virginia Beach. So that'll be, we're going to hire about 40 or so people there. That office, I think, is going to open up in the fall. I don't know exactly when that's going to open up, but I think it's going to be in the fall, late summer, early fall. See there, Virginia Beach is one of our premier area census offices. Some of the jobs we're going to have, starting at around $12 an hour up to about $45 an hour for that area census office. But we are hiring about 500,000 people in our 8-state region. So we're going to have quite a few jobs available. So another thing we're looking for is if you have a job board or anything like that, that you can help get the message out that we're hiring, pretty good paying jobs. So between $12 an hour up to about $20 an hour for our enumerators and door knockers. And those are good jobs because they're work from home and they're also make your own hours. So if you can work 2 hours, great. If you can work 40 hours, great. So it's a good job for vets, for college students, for retirees, for many different people.
You have to be 18, is that?
18 years old. Yep. There's some of the numbers of potential pay rates, and then here's some generic information about the census. Has just so much information at census.gov. You can go here and look at, you can find out more. Here's my information. I'm available to any of you. Of course, Jalilda will be my point of contact, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. And then, of course, we're going to have a presence on the internet, and here's some other ways you can reach us. So that's basically it.
Hey, thank you. Questions, John?
Is the litigation on the content of the thing, is that finally adjudicated?
It's not. So we will find, the Supreme Court will look at the citizenship question in June.
Okay.
So we're hoping to have that put to bed one way or the other.
All right, thank you.
When does everything start?
So the actual census day is April 1st, 2020. We'll be sending out mailers in late March. That'll start the process, but we're targeting April 1st as the big kickoff day.
When does
It ends, we have to have everything on the desk of the president by December of 2020. It'll probably end by September so we can start counting the numbers. But if we get, a great response online, it could end, quicker. We'll start sending people out into the field, knocking on doors, probably in the summertime to those areas, for the people who are not counting, who have not sent in their forms or responded.
So, next steps. On the 2nd of April, the mayor will read a proclamation declaring that first week, Census Week, to kick off our effort at promoting what has to happen. The mayor will also appoint a complete count committee. And you and I have a quality 15-minute schedule to decide who will be on your complete count committee. And I'm sure your mayor will entertain any ideas that you might have about who might serve on that. We're looking for people with influence in the community, people who can get the word out of how important this is. It's typically leaders in our community that we look for. So we'll come to our manager with a proposed budget at some point after the complete count committee has been established. And we may ask for an event or a festival or art. We'll ask for something, I'm sure, to help with the promotions. And so that's it.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. Very important work that you do.
And again, you guys are in great shape with Jalilda. You're really lucky to have her. Trust me, we've been all over the state, and you guys are in great shape.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, on to a very important topic right now, and if I could ask the city attorney maybe to give us an update, synopsis, and we're going to be under a little bit of a time constraint because we have to make a decision to get the notice, the official notice out there. Was it by 3 o'clock?
The ad needs to be to the.
The ad has to be in by 3. So, that might be, once we get through things, one of our first decision points.
Why is that in the 45-day count? Why does it have to be agreed today? And if we're being rushed, why didn't we meet sooner?
We just got the order.
I know, but my point is, if you look at 45 days, we have to do it today. Okay. Just,
Okay.
I don't understand the timeline.
Okay,
Can
let's
someone
go
walk
ahead
me
and
back
proceed at this
45
point.
days and show me why that's the case?
Okay, I've placed everybody's place the final order, which was entered at about 9:30 this morning, which declares the seat vacant. By state law and pursuant to our charter, the city council has 2 deadlines. The first deadline is a 15-day deadline, and that is for the adoption of a resolution directing the city attorney's office to file a petition calling for a special election. We did not have that on your agenda, your printed agenda, because we didn't know when the order would be entered. We have a draft of a resolution that you may choose to add on today. If there is not consensus, or if there are not 8 votes to add an item on today, 15 days would obviously be Wednesday, 2 weeks from now. So you could take that issue up at your first meeting in April. Your other deadline is the deadline for appointment. The city council has the authority to appoint someone to fill the Beach District position for 45 days from today, which again is the date of the order. After that time, the appointment can fall to the judges of the circuit court. So that's what your legal constraints are. How you choose to proceed within those deadlines is a matter for the body to decide. There is a proposal that was set forth with the at the direction of the mayor and the vice mayor, that I understand is subject for your discussion at this point.
Okay, you know, this is obviously a very important topic, not only to the council, but to the public. And, you know, I think it's incumbent upon us to proceed in a way that is fair and equitable and transparent. I think if we can agree from that, you know, going forward, you know, that would be in everybody's best interest. So I guess the idea, I guess the first order of business is to decide on the 15-day.
Can I ask one
Oh,
little
yeah,
question
John.
before then? Because it mentions here, I just want to understand it, that any objections to this order may be filed in the clerk's office within 14 days of the entry day of this order. What does that mean? And what's the consequences of objections filed and it's acted on?
The order is, as I read it, final, the statement of objections would be for purposes of allowing somebody to preserve error in the event of an appeal. It is not clear to me that there is a right of appeal, but different legal scholars have taken different legal positions on that issue. So I don't think for your purposes and your deadlines, I think the date you have to use is today, even though there may be objections filed and even though there may be some notice of appeal filed.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand what it meant since someone took the point to make it a big statement in the letter.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, anybody else point of discussion at this point?
The decision we're making for 3 p.m. today is only relative to the deadline of 15 days, correct? I'm trying to understand what the 3 p.m. thing is.
That's the pilot's deadline to have the ad running.
No, I could care less about the pilot.
Okay, and that is for the,
But there's other ways of getting it out other than the newspaper.
yeah, but, you know, I think, you know, we just gotta go according to, you know, a procedure here. I think the thing is that, my advice, but, you know, I would like to hear, you know, discussion first from anybody that,
We knew this was coming.
yeah. And, you know, I think one of the things that, I think we owe the public to at least try to have a representative at the, you know, at the ocean front, even though it's an interim one. And I think the selection process, you know, once again, is gonna be an important one. And, you know, just proceeding forward, you know, this is an important decision, but, you know, I think we got 2 phases we gotta look at here, is the interim appointment, and then, you know, deciding the first order of business is, you know, now correct me if I'm wrong, you know, Mr. Attorney, that the decision is to have the special election during the upcoming November 1st election, or declare a special election on our own at a separate date. And wouldn't it be, you know, in the best interest of the public to have it during a time of a general election when there would be a high turnout, and also allow the, you know, the opportunity for all the candidates, because that's going to be a separate item. You know, we're going to have the interim appointment and then the election, you know, to allow the public enough adequate time to vet the, you know, people running.
Well, there were 2 separate questions that you asked me there. Let me separate them. Question number 1 relating to when the special election is held. The law contemplates that the special election will be ordered by the court at the next general election unless the local governing body
Right.
requests a different time. So I guess the first question for this body is, do you want to go with the standard, which is at the next general election, or do you want to consider requesting that special election to be held at a different time? The second question you asked was the benefits of doing it pro and con. That is not a question for me to answer. Obviously, there are cost considerations and turnout considerations and other considerations, but I defer to you and the
Okay.
body on that issue.
Okay, discussion. John?
I don't know that I want to go earlier, but I think it's interesting to note that in the House of Representatives, within 60 days, they hold an election. If it's, no matter what day it is, on a Tuesday, they hold it. Why? Because they think the people's judgment, no matter how small the turnout, is better than a political appointment. It also goes back to the days when the House of Representatives and the senators came from the states and were appointed by the states. I understand the historical point of that. But I think it does point out is that no matter how small the turnout, it's more than 10 people. And so we're making the selection for, at 5,000 turnout, I think they're smarter than 10 in terms of representing what people think in the larger body politic. And I think the part that mitigates against that is, I was just doing my own analysis, is you'd have to hold it 55 days prior to the November election, but after the primary, because I don't think we can get 55 days before that. So it means it's in July or August, which means there's very few. You even have suppressed people gone that otherwise want to participate. So I do think, though in Congress, that would still happen, because that's how it works. There's not a choice. That's how it works. We have a choice, so I think it does mitigate for the general election in November, but I don't think that's universally true. If this was in the fall and we could do it, or if it was in February or March, I think I would come to a different conclusion, because there is substantial people here. They're not going on holiday. There's plenty of time to people to act. But I think where that window falls is just a bad place, because you walk back 55 days from November the 6th, I think it is, or whatever the date is. You're back into, you could probably get to September, but it's a narrow window and probably doesn't work best for our public. So I'm not universally committed to always saying I'll do that, but in this particular case, walking the calendar, I think it does make the most sense. But I don't think money is the reason to deny people the right, if the opportunity is right, to pick versus having 10 people pick.
Hey, Jim?
Well, no, based on what John says, I probably don't need to make any comments. Does anybody want to have it any other day other than the general election?
Can we agree that, the general election, with the General Assembly would be the most appropriate date?
And then the other question would be, because I believe takes a supermajority to add this to the agenda, if everybody's comfortable adding it to the agenda tonight, we can do that.
We prepared a resolution because
Resolutions are us.
that would direct us to file the petition, assuming that, or not assuming, but in the event that you elected to go with the general election date, you would need 8 votes to add it, and then once it was added, of course, it takes a simple majority to adopt.
Okay, so
Okay,
we got that part.
okay, so we're okay to proceed? Okay, great, then we'll bring this up to our,
And the other stuff.
okay. Ed and the Beacon, all right, now I guess the next order of business is the invitation for people, to submit, their applications to come in. Now, we do have some precedent over the years. Shannon was an appointee originally. Brad Martin was appointed, and, the format that we had was to solicit the resumes and, and background on individuals, and then interview in council chambers. So this way the public, can see and have a visible and transparent, process going forward. Now, are we in agreement on that? Josh?
I want to make sure they also file the financial disclosure statement, which I just want to make sure that people.
No, I think that was a good addition.
I just want to make
Yeah.
sure people listening hear that, because they heard the resonating question. I just want people watching to know that the same thing we all fill out when we run, they would also file. That's what I was mentioning.
Jim?
Yeah, and just to follow up on what the mayor says, everybody should have this document at your place.
May I set my stuff down on top of it?
That big pile there, on top of the blue package there,
Oh,
John.
top of the blue.
So basically
there,
what it
yeah.
says is, this is the mock-up of the ad. So the ad basically says, we're requesting a letter of interest, a resume, statement of economic interest, and a completed questionnaire. It gives a web address for people to get that information, gives mail and email address for submitting it. And this is similar, I don't know if everybody received also, Amanda was kind enough to give us copies of the stuff that we did in 2011 and 2013, including copies of those ads. Okay, well, I've got a photocopy of the last ad that was done here, which, you know, I mean, it's the same stuff. The difference is this year, I guess, 6 years past the last time we did it, we'll be able to push it on social media, which really wasn't as big a factor 6 years ago, and run it in other areas like that, as well as doing the newspaper, which I guess still has some sort of at least legal requirement for other things. But I just want to make sure everybody saw this particular document.
Maybe not in the newspaper ad because of cost, but I think on the social media and that link, there ought to be a map so that people can see the beach district in enough granularity to know that they live in it. Because
great
people
idea,
think the
John.
beach district and they think this, when it goes to Plaza, goes to Red Wing, it's much more encompassing than they might imply. But I understand space, we might think social media is a better place of a map, but we could have the link to where, for a map to see if you
Yeah,
live in
our
a
website.
district like that or something like that.
Website.
Correct, but just so
The
we
GIS
have,
map.
that would be great, and the granularity such that you can tell if you live there or not.
And don't they have another link where you just punch in
put
your
your
address
address
and
in, yeah.
find out? you
Well,
know, what
whatever it is, I
district
just
you're
think people need to see the map, because most people do not know where the
in. Right,
districts are.
Jess,
Could we do a targeted ad on social media for people who live in the beach district?
Oh, yeah, you can do that nowadays.
Because you can literally upload the data you
I'll
want.
tell you what, if
and
that's a possibility, it
it's
wouldn't be a
definitely a
bad idea.
possibility.
It is.
It's 100%. I think, I mean, it's better money spent than in the pilot, because we can get.
I think we have to use it.
Yeah, but
No,
it's
no,
a
no,
link, yeah,
I
it's
know
a
we
link.
have to, I know we legally have to advertise in the pilot, but I'm saying, as far as
Yeah.
trying to get the word out, we can specifically target people
Now,
who
let's
live in
take
that area.
advantage of the social media capacities that we do have. Barbara?
If anybody doesn't know by now that there's going to be this appointment, they're not enough interested in the government to be considered. I don't worry about it.
You never really
People get
know a
interested.
latent demand that might come up. I always tell people, it's
I
like
would
Gomer
hope they
Pyle
would
used
follow
to say,
things.
surprise.
They thought they were going to run for council. Shouldn't be latent.
Okay. Okay, are we okay with the April 8th deadline for the applications?
Well, that's
That's short.
very,
Because we're gonna need that for the ad, right?
So,
And you gotta do
exactly, so,
look at the ad.
I know. the ad would run this next Sunday and the following Sunday.
Okay.
And is it possible for the ad to have, I know this might sound strange, but if I'm looking for something, is it why the ad can't have the timeline that we're acting on? Maybe that sounds, are we adopting, maybe not get this, but if we're adopting this timeline, to me, would that not make sense? So
Can
that-
we just create a landing page with all of this information
could.
and the deadlines and put the link in the ad and then they can
Yes,
follow that to
yep.
the landing page?
What's actually advertised in the pilot would just be this,
I understand, but I'm just thinking, often when you see an ad, if it's for an important position, which this is, it would say at least, we're making the decision by this date, or, I'm just saying, we just need to make sure somewhere it makes it easy, but if it's on if we're doing social media and put all that information there, because I'm just telling you, if you're really trying to be expansive and really soliciting, then you just gotta make sure that people see the perspective of what
What are the
they're-
dates of the budget hearings?
That's another thing I was gonna ask next, is one of those relative to this.
Yeah.
If I might respond?
Yeah, Dave?
We are scheduled for 5 Tuesdays worth of briefings in April.
Well, what are the budget hearings from the public?
Geez. I've got those.
What are these dates? Because this date of 9 April is also during
April
spring break.
24.
My question was gonna be,
Yeah,
I don't know
that's
about
gonna
other
be
people with
terrible.
children or doing things, I
April
might be out of
24th
town.
date?
That's not a good week.
I'll be out.
Is it 9th or the 16th? I forget.
the 16th.
16th is gonna be a bad day for
Yeah.
people.
It's gonna be horrible.
I don't think you're gonna have enough people here to
What
hold a
day?
special. 16th of April.
It's
during
a
spring.
bad day for me.
It's a bad week because kids are out of school.
It's
And I'll be
spring,
out. I won't
be here.
spring break runs from the 9th to the
17th.
17th.
Yeah, that's just a bad week.
From a
I could
Tuesday
just
to a
tell.
Wednesday?
No, it goes,
It's that Monday. It's like a 7th. and then-
no, it actually, it runs on Friday this year.
Good Friday, and then it
Yeah.
runs through that whole week.
12th through the
The
20th?
12th through the 20th. So
Right, it's
people,
just a bad week.
people aren't gonna be back in business till the 22nd. So I think whatever day we meet, we should be meeting we might need to meet like a special session.
And I think we say possible vote for an appointment. I think people need to know who we're
Yeah.
going to appoint before we vote so they can come down and tell us what they think.
Yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, we're assuming that what they think doesn't matter and it should matter. So I think this
Does mean
schedule
We're
needs
not gonna have
work.
anybody here at the council meeting on April 16th?
Might not.
I mean, that's a regular council meeting day, right?
It is.
So then what everybody's saying then is to shift.
Should we have a special the week after?
Well,
I plan to be here,
So will people be here on the 9th?
priority.
Yeah.
I will not be here after that Tuesday, the 16th.
But then I'm talking about the 9th of April.
I'll be here.
People will be here on the
I'll be here the
9th.
9th as well.
So we could still review the applications on the 9th and then do the other thing on the 23rd.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Well, only if we complete and come to in the past, what we've done, we've looked at all the applications, and then we
Wait, the
just,
short list.
and then we did the interviews, so I'm trying to figure out on here, I see,
The 23rd.
the interviews will be the 23rd, correct?
Yeah.
So then will we meet for special session for an appointment?
There's
That could also be the 23rd.
That's
Well, but then we're not giving the public an
a chance to
opportunity
know
to
who
do
we're
their own
doing.
due diligence.
But the third, there's 5 Tuesdays in April, I think.
There are five, there
So
are,
we could meet on the 30th, the
there
5th
are
Tuesday.
five.
You have a budget hearing scheduled, public hearing on the 30th. Scheduled for the
Have we
30th.
adopted that schedule yet? Have we advertised that schedule yet?
Yes.
But have we adopted it formally, the council adopted that schedule?
Oh, we have some requirements for advertisement, so you really
What other
pinch.
dates, what other dates would meet those requirements besides the
You've got,
30th?
you've got a hearing on the 24th Wednesday, and then you've got that final
Which
hearing
one's
in
required by
chambers.
Which the one is required by state law,
Okay,
which is the real estate tax one, right?
yeah.
That one.
The 30th is the assessment increase one.
Not sooner than 10 days to the,
30 days from the date it's noticed in the paper.
right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say something that I don't want to be misrepresented, but, you know, I think in the past, what we did the interviews and did the selection on the same night. And I realize that, you know, the public will have, you know, like I said, I just think we should this is eventually gonna be a council decision, it's gonna be a personnel decision. And, why I value, the public input and everything, I think we have to proceed expeditiously.
I just can't support that. I don't know about the
Okay.
rest. I think you
But
can't
let's
cut
open
the
it up for
people out.
discussion, okay? I think that's the way we've done it in the past.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I've been through this with, when we appointed Harry, Rita, Prescott, Shannon, Brad, one other, wasn't there? Anyway, every single one of those, we did it that particular way because typically, after you do the interviews, I mean, it's pretty clear, that there's a consensus or there's after you see people speak and you go through this, you kind of get a feeling of who's done their homework, who actually knows what's going on with all this stuff and go through there. But I distinctly remember that we were in this closed session and Harry and a couple of the other people from Kempsville were sitting out in the lobby. And we went out there and they were all still sitting out there and we, then they all went into the formal session and we voted and made the nomination. So I think it was the same thing with you and Brad too. Weren't you guys here the same?
Yes, it was December 17th, 2013.
Yeah, so I mean,
Y'all did the interviews and then y'all came back here and did whatever y'all did and then came back out and announced the two people.
Yeah, John?
Couple of
I
hours.
know that's the way we have done it because that's how the power brokers at the time wanted to do it. I don't think you can assume that that's what the public appreciates and wants. That's not the same thing. I think that people have a different expectation today. I think they've expressed that in so many ways. I think tradition has its place, but when it disenfranchises people the right to be heard for who's going to represent them before we vote, I think that is presumptuous on our part that we don't need their input on who we think should be the person serving them. Now, maybe you're comfortable with that? If I thought in the past we had more votes to think about it differently, I would have been more boisterous about it, But now we have a different voting coalition here that maybe permits a more small d democratic approach and errs on the side of transparency. But expediency on picking who sits here is not a criteria we should be embracing for the consequences of the decisions that the person will make while they sit here. I think that's a poor reason, in my personal opinion. I respect everyone else's view, but I'm just saying that is not a process I can endorse.
Rosemary, and
We're
then
gonna get
Jess.
lots of input prior to the selection process. That's the opportunity we get to hear from everyone. Just like on all other issues, we hear lots of input prior to a vote.
But that's not to pick someone to serve at the consent of the governed. Now they're serving at the consent of the appointees. It's not the same.
Jess?
When is the day that we have to report? It's 45 days from today. When is 45 days from today?
I believe I did the math and it was May 3.
May 3?
Is that the date you got?
Yes.
Tomorrow should be day one.
So,
You have the budget.
no, I mean, I understand we want to put somebody in the seat before the budget, and I'm on team get somebody in here for the budget cycle, but aside from, and I agree with what John's saying about how we owe it to the public to give them time to collect their thoughts, but I also do not appreciate being rushed and pressured to make a decision the same day. I don't think any of us at this table should have to say, all right, well, we heard your interview. Great. Okay, let's all talk about it, and then let's go make a decision. I don't hire people in my business that way. I don't think people should hire. I don't think we should hire somebody on behalf of the public that way. I would come back in Wednesday. If we're going to meet on the 30th and we decide we want a night to sleep on it. I mean, I think even that's fine, having a 6 p.m. special session that Wednesday. I don't think anything prohibits us from doing that. But I do think we owe everyone an opportunity to think about it, for us to publish a short list and say, here's the people that showed up, here's the people we were impressed with, what are your thoughts? I mean, we could even go for something as simple as like putting that out on social media, because it's not like we don't have these tools in our disposal, and we do need to do a better job of employing them.
Hey, Barbara?
When will the public know who the people are who are being considered?
April 9th.
What is that, Mark?
April 9th.
April 9th?
The public will know April 9th. So we'll have 2 weeks to hear from the public about the people who are being considered. I have a lot of concern about the person who is selected, making certain that they have ample time to be comfortable with making such a very important decision as on this budget. I mean, to immediately have to vote on this budget is going to be difficult, and I think giving whoever is selected ample time, like I say, to get comfortable with making such a decision and attending the public hearing as a council person, not just a spectator, I think is important.
Anybody?
I think we've already ruled out that they're not going to make the budget hearings.
Well, didn't you say it's the 24th?
2 budget hearings are tentatively scheduled for the 24th and the 30th.
So if we made the appointment the 23rd, that would be the opportunity for them to be.
A heck of a first meeting.
Well, but they don't have to vote that night, they're just listening. So.
Well, first of all, our whole budget process is poor to start with, so I don't know how, unless you really work hard the way we do it, even the council's not well informed that's sitting here, because it's designed to be death by PowerPoint, and that's information over knowledge. So I do feel sorry for the person to try to decipher that, whether it's 60 days or 45 days. I think unless you really are immersed in the fine details, you are not prepared to understand, and certainly not understand an alternative, because it's designed to support inertia and not to support change. But that's just an inherent part of the process that we have to work against. But I think it's not the same to know who is, like everything else. Look, until you know who it is, then people generally aren't as, I suspect you're going to get, except for the people lobbying for someone, which has already started, So that's, but that isn't, what lobbying from the special interest groups, which are never in short supply, isn't the same thing as hearing from the latent public that otherwise doesn't comment much but have their own views. So you have to work really hard at understanding that latent demand signal that's out there, the quiet public. And generally speaking, they're energized when they know who it is that we plan to pick. That's what, it's like issues. It's, it's like they don't go to the planning commission, but they come to the council. Why? That's where the final decision is made. We see that over and over and over. And I think it will be true of this. And yes, I agree on the budget, it's going to be difficult. We're getting the budget on the 26th. We've gotten lots of stuff before then, but it's not integrated. There's no methodology. It's not prioritized. Everything's a one-of-one priority. So it's really pretty much valueless without tremendous amount of work. It doesn't really help you make decisions very much. And I think that person's going to face those issues whether they're on the 30th or whenever, because they're not going to be able to start where we started on March 26th unless they have no job and no sleep and say they've really reviewed that document. I mean, it defies the time of sleep. And you know what you face working and trying to do this. This budget isn't designed to promote change. It's designed to promote acceptance. And let's just be honest about it. So I don't think that, to me, is a governing consideration in terms of giving the people real chance to comment on who we think should act on their behalf.
Aaron?
I'd just like to echo, we have 45 days to appoint someone, right?
Yes,
From the date of this letter. And I mean, I don't know if it's the elephant in the room or not, but this was a very contentious race from the onset. And while I understand we want to be able to expedite this process, we still have to do our due diligence and taking our time and walking step and hand in hand with the public, because this was a very contentious race. So whoever we're going to appoint in there, it has to be with the approval of the district who they're going to represent, and for the fact of we wanted to turn a corner here, we wanted to be a different council or go in a different direction in our city, and while we're on that pathway, tell me if I'm wrong, this is the first time we ever had a council member removed from council and where we had to appoint someone else. So that it should be thought of as well in this process. And there's a reason why we have to have more of a public input and not just appointing someone to a seat because someone else decided to run or leave or whatever may happen. This was a core issue. Someone was removed from this council. So I think it's beholden upon us to have more of thought in a process that's more involved and in line with the public's approval, not just our approval of who can get through the budget, who can understand what they're doing, but in line with who's going to represent that district. And so that's my 2 cents.
Okay, I heard from Jess, John, and Barbara. Louis, what's your thoughts?
Well, I have a question first. Seems to me, as I recall, the last 2 times at least that we've done this, that we narrowed it down to a list of about 5. Am I correct?
Create a short list.
Well, the
Create a
first
short
time,
list.
the first time the list was short enough, we just interviewed everybody
Maybe so, but
with the Kempsville round.
the last time we did it, we had a whole bunch of people, and we had to narrow it down to a list of finalists, I guess, and that's the ones that we ended up interviewing. So is that the process that that's going to take place here?
That's what
I think we're gonna have a lot of interest. I think we're gonna.
Oh, I
have a
think we're
lot
going to
of-
have,
I think we need to
Respond.
create a short list. There's no need to put everybody through this if they don't really have a chance.
That's why I think it's going to take all of the 9th to get the short list. Then they got to, everybody would have filed their financial disclosure statement. They would have answered these standard questions that we had. They would have had a resume of whatever they wanted to say about themselves, right? And then we would have gone through that, when we finish that process for the people that, then we're gonna have our short list from that. That's gonna take some time to do. That's not gonna be a quick process, so that's gonna.
right,
And then, as you said, that'd be right, and then we would go out and interview those people on the 23rd. I think Jessica was suggesting maybe we could come back on the 24th and get to the point.
Well, go ahead, Louis, finish.
Well, what I was getting at is if we're gonna create the short list, are we gonna make that short list public? That's the first question.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have to, yeah, we have to.
Okay, so,
On that night, I think we should.
On the
yeah,
9th.
then when we create it, yeah,
That's
I
when you
agree.
get the list.
Okay, so we're gonna make the short list public,
16.
is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay,
How, wait,
and,
You'd make the short list
Okay,
available on the 9th or the
Let it-
16th?
Okay, let Louis finish, let's,
I'm sorry.
you know, let's get,
and so once we've done that, then you're gonna have a situation where people are gonna wanna come down and comment on the short list. That's what it comes down to. So you're gonna have either in a regular session or a special session, the opportunity for people to do that.
We could do that
Yep.
on the 16th.
okay, Sabrina.
Well, that was gonna be my
we've
question.
never
When
had
will we
a
give
forum
the
for a
public
council
an opportunity to come down and speak about that short list?
Yeah, this is what we're hashing out right now.
And
That's ridiculous. We're
so
elected to serve.
the next question is on the night that people come down to comment on the short list, is that when we're going to vote, or are we gonna wait and vote in a subsequent session?
Think, that'll be the question. Barbara?
I would suggest that, all right, the short list will be known on the 9th, which is a regular council meeting. The next regular council meeting is the 16th. We'll have a lot of items to vote on that night. It's a regular council meeting, and we have never not had a quorum for a regular council meeting. That night could be the time for public comment on the 5 people who we select. And then the next week, the 23rd, would
During
be
the
the time.
formal session,
Right,
right.
during our formal session.
Okay, all
Our
right.
regular formal session, public hearing. And then the next Tuesday is the 23rd, and that's when we could hold the interviews. We will have had public comment, we'll interview, and then we can make our selection. But I think that
We'll have that
16th,
whole week
Yeah.
also between the 16th.
the whole week after the public comment,
Hear from
to
people.
hear from people.
John?
I'm with Jessica. I'm not comfortable doing it and discussing it and looking at all of it and voting the same night. I just won't. And in the past, in all fairness, you go back and look in the record, we have moved moved around when we met to vote. I've been here when that's happened.
Not for regular council
I could go back and
agenda.
look at the records too, but it's
I
what
wanna
6
see
people
that.
say makes the decision.
Yeah, Jess?
on April 24th, the day after the 23rd, we're all gonna be together anyway for the budget hearing. I recall us voting on stuff when we meet for special things before. We can I believe we could call a special session right before the budget hearing on April 24th, which we're already gonna be at Old Donation, all together anyway. So what's the one day?
We don't want I disagree with you there, Jessica. We don't want to mix the public hearing on the budget with this.
I do agree, because people are gonna still want to speak because they're gonna vote.
Right, yeah. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if I thought that the schedule, frankly, that Barbara mentioned was pretty good. And that is, we would review the applications, we would shortlist it, and then we would have the
Public hearing.
public hearing on the issue, and then the next week we would vote.
I mean, it's like any other
do
issue. You don't
interviews.
say, I'm gonna vote on the budget and how I'm gonna vote one day and then vote on it the next.
But this is,
You're
we're letting the budget process and what we think people need to vote drive our timeline, and I think Aaron is right. That is a mistake and a disservice
But you're
to the public.
declaring how you're gonna vote and not doing it till the next day, and that's not right either.
Well, then
We
let's-
don't do that on any
No,
other.
I'm talking about having
Okay,
having
let's
the
get
public
orderly here.
comment,
Oh, no.
16th, yeah.
that's all.
Okay, Jim.
I agree with what Lewis and Barbara are saying in terms of this schedule. I think it's reasonable. I think the fact that you end up having 2 weeks between the time that people's names are put out public and we actually have any sort of vote is a good thing. I agree with Lewis that we don't want to do this during the budget hearing, and I think John was there too, because we don't want to do it. You know, I think, and I was just asking Amanda just to make sure, you know, people aren't a lot of people will, but people aren't just going to submit everything at the last minute. So she's going to have plenty of time as the applications come in to put everything together for us. You know, we can set aside a couple hours in closed session to go over these things. I don't know that it's going to take a whole lot of time to get to whittling it down, because I think, I don't know, a lot of people say they're gonna run, a lot of people say they're gonna do it, but once they actually have to do all the paperwork, I think that's gonna be a self-selector right there. People aren't gonna wanna do a lot of that work. It sounds great until you see what you have to do. But, so I mean, in my opinion, I think this is good. I like Barbara and Lewis's comment about how we schedule it, so I mean, I think it's a good idea.
John?
I just
and
want to
then
come
Joyce.
back. This process isn't about make what we think in terms of letting the budget vote, because they're going to have to vote no matter what, no matter how much time they had. This is about making sure that the public, we're going to come out, say, oh, we picked them, vote. Well, now no one knows in the public who we plan to nominate for the seat. So now people who had their views, we haven't heard what they think about who we plan to pick. That's like saying, let me comment on all the Supreme Court nominees, everybody does, and then the president picks one. Oh, and then a whole bunch of other people come out, and the Congress holds hearings for the people who like them and the people that don't like them, and they hear all the input, but they're now talking about a singular person who's going to be exercising the ability to confiscate revenue, give people property, and it's the people who otherwise would be picking, and I think Aaron's right, was very contentious, and we shouldn't be letting the budget process, something that we value, may not be isn't as valuable as giving the people maximum opportunity to express themselves. And your point was well taken about a very contentious election, and I can tell you this is not going to be an uncontentious choice, and anyone who thinks this is going to be a kumbaya moment, I don't think that's true, and I think all of us privately know that. And it's not probably going to be unanimous, however it goes. And it'll be a much longer discussion in here than I think people anticipate. And so I think we really need to let the people speak. And that timeline is designed, in my opinion, to not to maximize public participation. That's my view, and I think we should be maximizing it, not constraining it.
Okay, at this point, I think I'm gonna go around the table and let everybody have a say, and then let's, and then, we'll make a decision. Sabrina, you're up on deck.
Well, the circumstances that we have, they're not circumstances that any of us would have chosen. They've been given to us, and we have to take those circumstances, integrate it into the process that we have, and a decision has to be made. That's just what we have to do. I do agree with having the public input on the list that, we narrow down. I think that's very important. I agree with that. I also, the timeline that has been set, what Louis Jones and Barbara Henley have suggested, that seems like it's in line with, a good timeline and process, and I would agree with that timeline.
Shannon?
Having gone through the appointment process personally to find myself at this table at the end of that, I know how hard the process was to get up to speed on everything that we as a council do and look at on a weekly or daily basis. And obviously, no one is up to speed. It's just like running for election. When Jessica sat at the table the first day, and then Aaron and Sabrina, I'm sure you didn't know everything, and you've learned more and more every week, and it's a learning curve. I feel for this person coming in because in a matter of days, more or less, they're gonna have to vote on a $2 billion budget and understand what their vote is doing to the city and to the citizens. So while I agree with what Sabrina just said with Barbara and Lewis's timeline suggestions, I do believe we do need the public input, but I would like to see somewhere, maybe when we narrow it down to those 3 or 5 or the short list of candidates, can they sit down with Dave or John or somebody and get a crash course on what this budget is and give them some type of a Cliff's Notes version crash course to get them up to speed so that when they are here to make the vote that's going to impact this $2 billion budget, that they understand what they're voting on as best as they possibly can. I would like to see them have some type of a crash course so they know what they're looking at.
That's a really good idea.
And more than one view of what the budget is.
And that's why I said Dave or John, I mean, you both have opposite views on what the budget should be and how that we approach that. And so, you know, maybe that's the answer. But they really do need to be given some hand-holding, if you will, for those first.
Give them a cram course in
Yeah,
budget.
Okay,
'cause
but
it's not-
So you
Shannon,
like
are
the
you saying
timeline?
that we need some extra time, or?
No, the timeline's fine. We just need to work that in to make sure that those shortlisted candidates understand what they're facing. And that they know in just a matter of a week, 10 days, they're gonna have to vote on $2 billion budget. And they don't know what it is.
Yeah. Rosemary?
I agree with that. The Jones-Henley timeline.
Yeah, I do too.
Please don't do that.
Okay, Aaron?
First of all, let's, I've heard over the timeline. Can we get a clear date of what their timeline is? We have a list, we vote on it.
Do you want me to state what I understood?
Yes.
Just so
Yeah.
that everybody
Yeah.
knows what we're talking about, and then
Yeah,
if I'm
that
wrong,
would be great.
you can tell me? What I heard was the application deadline would still be the 8th. You would have a closed session to review the applications and create a short list on April the 9th. You would release the names on that short list on April the 9th. There would be public comment on the short list at your regularly scheduled meeting on April the 16th. And then you would call a special session for April the 23rd, where you would conduct the public interviews, then go into closed session, and then come out of the closed session and make the appointment on the 23rd. That was what I understood to be the proposal from Mr. Jones and Ms. Henley. Did I get it correct?
Got it.
Right, and there would be a public input session on the 16th with the known people.
Yes, sir.
And a crash course on budget for those people.
And the crash course on budget. I'm sorry, I did not mean to.
Why don't we,
Yeah, put that in there.
I guess the point I have contention is first of all, we have more work to do. I mean, that point blank simple, we have more work to do. So I think we need to understand that, and I think we need to understand the budget is separate from the council who we're going to appoint at this seat, and it shouldn't drive who we place at that seat. So I feel uncomfortable myself, just personally, having that short list and then voting on it the same day. To me, I would just I really would like to go home, read over it, wake up confident with someone I'm going to choose. So
You're a no.
I'm a no. If we can fix that, if we can not vote on get the material if we can separate between having to vote on the same day where we have those candidates.
So you're okay up until April 23rd?
I am.
Okay, Jess?
So, ditto what Aaron said. I don't like the idea of a vote on the same day, but more so, public comment on the 16th is basically no public comment because that's spring break.
Right.
People go on vacation on spring break. They're not going to be here. I don't think that's a fair time to say, hey, public, come down, tell us what you think. By the way, we know you're all gone, because you're taking the only time you have time to go with your family and do things. So, I mean, I understand that it's an awkward time, but, you know, I don't see why we can't do interviews and public comment the same day. I'm already uncomfortable with voting on that same day. We can push that to the 30th if
Yeah.
we need to.
Because we have, until May 3rd, right?
May 9th.
May 9th, yeah, so,
No, May the
May 3rd to
3rd.
make
May
the
3rd.
appointment.
Yeah.
May 9th is the reconciliation, or I think it's the second Tuesday when we vote. The
Yeah.
first Tuesday in May is reconciliation.
so if I may.
Yes.
If we
They
can
have to
find
take
more
seat
time closer to that deadline to have more public input, I'm fine with it. But I think we have to get more public input, before May 3rd. And I don't see why, when we have, 23rd, we still have a whole week left before the 3rd. So I would like to, if we can find more time for public input. And that way we can vote. as well.
I think it should be May 8th, or April 8th application, April 9th review / release shortlist, April 23rd interviews, and then public comment, and then April 30th appointment.
At least people will be back from spring break.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I agree with that.
Hey, John?
I want to ditto. This reminds me how we always get the, Pier Deal or the convention hotel, and we're looking at it just before Christmas or the holidays, And if our purpose here is to pick a timeline that handicaps the person selected, we've done a good job. If our purpose is picking a timeline that denies us the opportunity to have unity on council, we picked a great schedule. And if our purpose was to communicate to the people that their ability to participate on a maximum basis isn't as important as the timeline we'd like to execute, we batted 100 on all three of those factors. And I don't want to be a part of that, and I'll be publicly expressing my dissent on that schedule if that's the one we choose. But no, I cannot be a party to a process that for expediency disenfranchises people not only as to their maximum participation, but we pick a time when we just didn't pick a time to have a special election in the summer because people are on vacation, which we all agreed. Now we pick a time for a public hearing when people are on, it's like, did we just go to a different planet? We just had two things and we used the same criteria, but we came to different conclusions. I have a hard time tracking that. So no, I do not support the schedule that was put forth by Ms. Henley and Mr. Jones.
Hey, Barbara?
Well, I think Sabrina said it well when she said, we didn't ask for this. We're just dealing with something the best way we can, that we have no choice but to do.
It's not the best
And I
way.
really don't appreciate all of this attributing these nefarious motives to our selection of this timeline. We have 45 days. We don't have but so much choice. If anyone is going to be out of town on the 16th and would not be personally able to stand before us at a public hearing, they can sure send emails or letters or make phone calls. I've been getting a lot of emails already, not from any group. I don't know who the latent public is, but people are already commenting, and I think we've got a month to receive comment, and I expect we will. So I really think by letting the short list be known by April 9th and having a public hearing for anyone who wants to appear before us in person, or they have the opportunity in so many other ways to communicate, and then the next regular meeting for our interviews. And if we really can't make up our mind on the 23rd, we could always at that time push it off a ways. But I really think, this
Cushion, actually.
this gives us the opportunity to move this along. And one of the things I'm going to be looking for in the person that I vote for is somebody who is interested enough in this government to be watching these sessions as we go through the budget and being up to speed when they apply, certainly not sitting home and not even following anything. I'm going to want to know how much homework they've done to get here. So I'll let that be known already. They better know what they're talking about and they better show me some interest. So I think there's plenty of time for people to get up to speed if they want this job, and I think there's plenty of time for the public to make comment. So this timeline works.
Okay, Aaron, you have
I mean, if we have 45 days, why are we not using the 45 days? I just don't understand why we wouldn't use the time allotted to us to make sure we choose someone who can, someone responsible enough who's going to fill the seat. And I don't think it's about the allotted time. I think it's about opportunity. How many opportunities are we going to give the public to have public input at a public session? So, I mean, ways of emailing and everything is a lot different than having a formal public session where you people actually come and speak their minds. I mean, we are beholden to them. This is their council. This is where they come and tell us directly face to face without doing the email. I mean, we have a responsibility to fulfill that seat and take every course of action to make sure we do it in a responsible manner. And at the very least, if we have 45 days, why will we not use the 45 days? I mean, really, help me understand. Because I'm open for all other ways of discussion. But if we have 45 days, let's use it. Let's use the time to make sure we out there talking to the public, giving them opportunity to be here. If a lot of people are going to be on spring break, why would we have a public session when they come speak their mind? They're not going to be here. That's kind of like, that's not transparency. That's basically saying, oh, city council is going to have a public meeting when they know everyone's going to be out of town. How that's going to make everyone around this table look? I think that's not smart. I don't see that as being a smart move. We should make sure that people are here. They don't have any excuse why not to show up other than their own excuse for not being here. But we ourselves should grant them an opportunity and place them opportunity at the doorstep. Say, hey, we're going to have a public input meeting where you are in town, and if you don't come, that's on you. But we're doing our job.
Louis?
I've already said what I want to do, so.
All right. And the count, Mr. Vice Mayor?
Well, you haven't said anything yet.
Okay, I will be. Yeah, okay, I think we're almost at a decision point. And I'm not getting out of it, and I'm going to say this. And I think one of my concerns, and, trust me, I am, for the transparency and everything, but I guess my concern is that right now, the Beach District does not have a representative. Right. And I know that we have 45 days. And once the person gets on board and gets up to speed, we're going to have a special election. And, we've had, these type of situations before. And let me just speak to you personally. I had the privilege of being sworn in on November, tomorrow is going to be my 4th month on this job. And since I got sworn in, we've had 3 recounts, in elections. It was a contentious election cycle in a very, very lot of ways. And we have a new chemistry on council. And believe it or not, I think it's great that we're sitting around talking about it the way we are. This is not the type of situation we're necessarily going to find a consensus, but at least we, come to an understanding. And yes, I am, and then all of a sudden, then we lose a district representative by a court action. And one of the main things we have to do is maintain the chemistry going forward. And we're going to have somebody coming in, I don't think we should preclude necessarily anybody that, comes in, not necessarily as a placeholder. They should have the opportunity to run. That's the American system. But once again, we don't want to give an unfair advantage. There's a whole bunch of other considerations going on here that I think is out of our control in many ways. And the thing is, I think that we have an obligation to the people in the Beach District to get somebody in as expeditious time as possible. And I know it was an unfortunate timing thing that we lost a council member from the get-go. And even though it is spring break, there are still going to be a number of people around. And I'll tell you what, one of the things that with our social media, with our representation, people were going to have the opportunity during that time. But ultimately, we respect and value the public opinion, but ultimately, it's going to be up to us to make the decision who's going to occupy that seat, going forward. And, my thing is, we do have the opportunities to get the public, involved. And Aaron, I agree with you 100%, but we have all this time. But once again, I think it really whittles down to, that seat is empty right now. And the people that live in that district have a right to have it filled sometime pretty soon. And that's aside from the budget process. And once again, I like that, the thing about getting people up to speed. But when push comes to shove, it's this body that's going to decide who gets in there. And we already know that there's been a number of jockeying and, things, inputs and everything going on right now. Things are going fast and furious. And from my seat, and I look at things different now through the prism of a mayor than I did, as a council person, we have to get the team on board. And then we have to get ready for the November elections. And Aaron, you're 100%, whoever said it was a contentious election cycle, it's probably going to be again, the way things could be looking. And so, I think that, a majority of council, has a, schedule that we can go by. And let's make sure, I ask the manager and Julie to make sure that, the public has the opportunity, once we come up with the short list, to solicit and make it user-friendly to get that input in. Jim?
So if we've got that, the other thing we need is the questions.
Okay. And the other thing, the questions that we're going to, ask.
The only one I saw was John's. I haven't seen
Okay.
any others. I had John's here
I
somewhere.
have a question.
Here's
Okay.
John's.
I sent it in the very day it came out.
Right here.
Here, I want us to submit them by, today.
Well, we were gonna try to get it, so, because she's gonna advertise this, and
Oh, you're gonna
we'll
advertise
get
the
the thing
questions?
set up on, no, not the questions, but it'll be on the landing page that Shannon was talking about, so.
This is, they'll be instructed to answer these questions with their application, that's what I understood,
Or
correct?
something.
Say that again, John.
My understanding was that there was gonna be a limited number of questions, one from each person, that makes 11 questions, and the applicants would be expected to address those 11 questions in their application.
Correct.
Now, here is a question that we haven't talked about relative to the question. What constitutes a completed application for the purposes of our consideration? This is good instruction to provide. If someone doesn't provide a completed financial disclosure statement, I would think that would not be a valid application.
I think that would be a disqualifier.
Now, the quality of their resume is up to them, but I think they should provide whatever that is. I wouldn't judge on what, because we have no standard for that, but if they didn't have a resume of some sort, I would think that would not be a application. I think someone, not what they answered, that's a different issue, but a person would have to have answered all the questions to have a completed application, and that I would rely upon the city clerk to be the quality control, and we would only see applications where they had a complete financial disclosure statement, they would have had a resume of their choice, and they would have answered all the questions independent of the content of the answers.
They were running, they would have to have.
That's exactly, I'm just trying to make sure that gives Amanda, some consent from us as to what our expectations are. I'm just trying to,
So they have to meet the 4 criteria: a letter of interest, a resume, a statement of economic interest, and a completed questionnaire.
Yeah,
If they don't have all 4 parts, then they're not
yeah,
actually
that's a
an applicant.
disqualifier. Mark?
I'm gonna play lawyer here for a second. What if an answer, you're not, I think I heard you say you're not asking the clerk to evaluate, but if it
Correct.
just says, I don't have if there's a question and the answer is, for example, I don't have a position on that, she's not gonna
that's
cast
correct.
it aside.
That's an
If there
answer.
are words written, to every question, she's going to
I
pass it
think I said no
through.
matter what they had as content, as long as there was content, that was acceptable.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that we understood clearly.
Good, Jim?
All right, so what I've got is, I've got John's question, which is, would you vote to stop the city council from continuing to circumvent city's charter limitations on council's ability to issue debt by using the Virginia Beach Development Authority to issue debt in its name and taxpayers responsible for? Rosemary, when there is such a pushback of not in my backyard, how can we address the need of affordable housing? Shannon is, what is your understanding of the financial mechanics of the resort to include tip residential parking permit program budget process expectations, development projects that are currently underway, and the resort, including open space. Mine's a lot simpler, so why do you want to be on city council? So, Sabrina, you have one?
Well, my question was concerning affordable housing. What is your plan for affordable housing? But if I need to come up with another one, I can. I'm sorry.
Great
They
minds.
said we only get one, is what they told us.
Oh,
Well, Rosemary had an
Great.
affordable housing
Okay.
one, so she was saying, should she change
I
hers?
mean,
Barbara?
I can give another one.
Do you support the agricultural reserve program? If the answer is yes, why? If the answer is no, why not?
Oh, you're right.
Okay?
Okay.
Jim, mine's really easy.
Okay, hang on. Jessica, go.
Do you plan to run for the seat you're trying to be appointed to?
You run in November. Okay,
What do you view to be the top 3 priorities in the city of Virginia Beach?
so Sabrina, what did you want to go back with?
I'm still thinking.
Okay. Aaron, do you have one?
I got like 4, but I've been trying to,
Make it all one really long
I'm
question.
trying to choose one. You keep
A,
adding
B, C,
commas.
and D.
A question in 4 parts.
I got a
Adding
4-part
commas
question.
to it. Yeah. Is the day the deadline, or we gonna vote on that?
She's going to put this online, yeah.
Oh, right, they're gonna do it today. That's right.
This part will not be published in the Beacon.
Right, but I mean, you got to have a landing page.
We're gonna do that.
So, describe what this team mean to you.
Okay. Once the council has decided the formulation, okay, of the budget and reconciliation, will you vote for it? Okay. I think, everybody give me a question then? Is that 11?
Sabrina,
For
did
10?
you want to change
Oh,
your
Sabrina, I
question?
still got Sabrina.
So you know what? I would probably, my question would be, what is your opinion of the hybrid voting system in our city? And if so, what's your opinion, and would you like to change it?
Probably tell you that.
Okay,
That was my second question.
Well, they'll say what it is. and
Nobody
then-
Yeah,
asked
I'm just
about
saying that'll
civil
probably
rights and
tell you.
flooding.
well, but we've got that top 3 priorities, why do you want to run, so. I feel certain we're going to
Can't
hear about
imagine
that.
that's not going to come up.
So most likely the landing page
If
would
it's
not
not
be
their
up
top
until
priority,
tomorrow.
it's going to be
Okay.
Whenever. The ad won't be over until,
Sunday.
Yeah,
So
we
just so it's
just have to
Sunday.
get them in.
Man, they take a big lead time. for-
And let me just say, I appreciate the conversation that went on. This is a most difficult, type of discussion to have because it's such an important discussion. And it's dealing with circumstances beyond our control that was established well during our articulation. And I'll tell you what, we're gonna hope for the best possible outcome for everybody, not only people at this table, but the public and especially the people at the Beach District.
And I would
Jim.
remind everybody, this was the easy part.
So, definitely is. Like I said, the most contentious part is to come.
You are correct.
Torches lit, let the games begin.
And so Mark, you're going to give me the, we'll do the add-on on this then.
I'm sorry, sir?
So I'm going to add this on to the consent.
You'll need a motion to add it and then a vote.
Copy that.
Just, you guys have done it many times before, but I can.
Yes, John?
So we'll have time, I know we have other briefings, I just want to make sure in the motion for executive session will permit us to discuss the litigation on Thursday with relative to Joe McDonald's suit, relative to the city's charter, and what does it mean in the state law. I'd like to have a time to discuss that. I'd like to make sure that the motion allows for that.
I have time.
So I know court date's Thursday.
Okay.
So is that under legal advice?
Under
What?
legal advice.
Will has a court date Thursday for his thing.
Yeah. Barbara?
Wait a minute, let's see, but Mark seems to have a problem now, so let's,
I just need to think through, the council is not a party to that litigation, so I don't know what advice I'd be asking to give that's relevant to this
Here's
body.
clarification, they're challenging the meeting, and that application would apply to city council as well, the interpretation as to residency. So the city council has a vested interest in the interpretation of that statute in our city charter. So we do have a stake in that issue, even though we're not a party in that, but the ruling would be applied to us as well.
Actually, the challenge is based on a statute that only applies to school boards.
Well, maybe I just need to be, I just want to I want to legally understand that, because I think a lot of people out in the public have asked me that question. I don't know about you, but they're thinking that if that happens, then that ruling would apply to us, and I would like to understand how we would not be legally vulnerable to someone saying, wait a minute, I don't care what the state statute is. Once you say that, how equal protection, blah, 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 how come it doesn't apply? I just want to, and if you're not prepared to do it today, I need you to be prepared. I want to understand that.
I don't know how we would be any different than the school board.
Well, see, like I said, I think it's worthy of being legally educated. And if you're not prepared, I don't want to surprise you, but there needs to be a time for that, because that is an
Yeah,
issue.
I don't see how we would be any different.
Okay. Yes, Barbara?
Just for the record, as far as I know anyway, all of that we just decided was done totally in front of the world on TV, and there hasn't been anything behind closed doors, and I don't want to read anything on social media that it was, right? I certainly don't know.
I made sure I read all the questions out loud.
Okay, all right.
Even
Just
if
for
I
the
couldn't
record.
read certain words.
No, I tell you, like I said, folks, this was a tough one, and I appreciate the discussion, and, that's what we're about. Thank you very much. Okay, are we ready to move on, Mr. Manager?
Yes, sir. Our next briefing is to receive an update on our Housing Resource Center, and so we'll ask Andy Friedman, our Director of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation, to come forward and kind of intro that, and he's got some excellent support here today that are actually hands-on running the operation, so happy to have the team here.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Happy to be here as we promised to give you an update on the Housing Resource Center, which officially opened on September 12th. And with me is Ruth Hill, who is our HRC administrator, as well as Pam Shine, our Service Systems Manager. So I'm only going to do a few slides. I want you to see this graph because it illustrates that even before we opened the Housing Resource Center, we were making progress on addressing homelessness. This is our point-in-time results back to 2007. And as you can see, we have come down consistently, certainly since 2013, but we've never been as high as we were back in 2010 since then. We're really almost half of what we were in 2010. So we are making consistent progress with the long-term application of the principles and the support that the council has given us. I just want to refresh ourselves on the purpose and goals of the center. We wanted to bring together a one-stop shop that enhanced our system of services, be a place where the community can continue and grow our efforts to address making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. Definitely want to be a good neighbor. And we want to reduce the impact of homelessness in the resort area. Just a reminder that the Housing Resource Center is not our entire system of services. We have partners all over the community that are part of our system, but it's part of our strategic plan, which this council adopted in 2017, which has a whole range of activities that we're undertaking to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. The HRC is an enhancement of our system, provides new shelter and permanent housing. It puts together all our partners and many of our resources in one place. We've integrated services both with our providers and with the Human Services Department. And we have a new and enhanced way for many in the community to continue doing the helping that they've been doing. And just to also a reminder, our role in the city is not to supplant community efforts, but to really focus and enhance and make them as powerful as possible. So I'm now, at this point, I'm going to ask Pam Shine to come up and talk to you about an issue that's come up many times, which is how do people get from where they are on the street out of homelessness? So Pam Shine, please come up. And this is the clicker. Go to the right.
Good afternoon, Honorable Mayor, council members, and Mr. Dave Hansen, City Manager. So our community has moved towards an approach that focuses on preventing and ending homelessness and rapidly returning those that have become homeless to housing. One of the key tasks we implemented about 3 years ago was restructuring our homeless service system. The model that we use to restructure our system has been described as the 3 A's model. That stands for access, to access our community-wide access to our homeless assistance services. Assessment, which stands for our standard evidence-based tool to assist determining in the depth to determine the depth of service needs of those households that are presenting as homeless. An assignment of intervention, which means referral and placement into shelter and or housing programs based on their service needs. So as you can see on the chart, we have 3 access points. It's to the far left. We have the Regional Housing Crisis Hotline, which is our primary access point. We have our Housing Resource Center, and we have our homeless outreach team. All 3 access points utilize the same triage tool to determine the nature of the housing crisis. Basically, they're focusing on whether or not the household is literally homeless or imminently losing housing. The first chart is the pathway to those that are literally homeless. So after they are triaged, they're referred to coordinated assessment, which is the middle box. Coordinated assessment conducts an assessment to determine their needs and provide referrals to housing and shelter and other services. Coordinated assessment also manages the vacancy of all of the housing programs as reported by those housing providers. So basically, coordinated assessment knows what is available in our system so they can quickly connect those households to shelter and or housing. And they also manage our by name list. So every individual or household that is connected to our system, if we aren't able to quickly connect them to housing on the day that they present, they're placed on our prioritization list. The bottom box, which is a rectangle that says diversion, is a brand new program that we launched during the opening of the HRC. And it's mainly targeted for families with minor children that are referred for diversion. So these families are presenting, needing shelter. And the goal of diversion is to attempt to prevent a household presenting for shelter from actually entering shelter by connecting those households to alternative housing arrangements. For an example, seeing if they can connect with family or friends. And even if they're able to connect with family or friends on a temporary basis, we remain in contact with those families until they are connected to permanent housing by providing them with case management, problem solving, shallow subsidies such as security deposit and first or second month's rent. To provide some insight regarding the output of the system, I have some data to share with you. And so the data is coming from last month in February. So the number of individuals or households that connected to our system last month was about 580. 46% of those households were actually literally homeless or imminently losing housing. 105 were referred to coordinated assessment. And out of 105, 19 were families that were presenting as literally homeless, needing shelter. And we were able to divert 11 of those families from entering the shelter system. And then 43 were actually placed from the 105. 43 were placed in shelter, 75 were placed on the prioritization list, and 50 were placed in permanent housing. So the second pathway is for folks that are imminently losing housing, and we define that as households that are losing housing within 2 weeks. That pathway looks very similar to our Literally Homeless pathway. We have the same access points, which is the Housing Crisis Hotline, and we also have the Housing Resource Center. The major difference is that from those key access points, households are referred directly to those providers that are providing prevention services, such as Samaritan House, the LGBT Life Center that focus on individuals from the LGBT community, and the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation. Once they're referred to those programs or those providers, they go through another assessment to determine how we can best help them to prevent them from losing their housing, which involves case management, landlord mediation, family mediation, and again, some shallow subsidy in the way of financial assistance, with the goal of them all being stably housed. The last month, we actually had 154 households presenting as imminently losing. Out of 154, 43 were referred to a prevention program, and out of 43, 40 was actually able to be stably housed and prevented from experiencing homelessness.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your support of the HRC, and I will continue our presentation. So, what we want you to know is that we've been quite busy at the HRC since we opened in September, and so we've had over 5,600 visits. That doesn't mean people, it means people that have actually come in to connect to services, including health services, including shelter, including day support, and meals. So those are the number of people that are connecting to us through our visitor management system. So in our building, we have singles shelter, we have day support, we have residential apartments, and we have family housing. So you can see on this slide that the number of bed nights for singles has been almost 7,000 bed nights since we opened. We've had 105 people that have actually come in and connected to emergency shelter in our system, in our building, and 32 individuals have already moved on to permanent housing. That's about a third of them have already moved on to housing in just 5 months. That's really good data for you. In the family interim housing, we've had over 5,000 bed nights of shelter provided. We've actually had 19 unduplicated individuals served, and 10 of those families have moved on to permanent housing. The family interim housing is quite robust, and they have really good case management services, and they're moving them out of that program quickly. We're excited about that. When this slide was created, we had 21 individuals that had moved into the permanent housing units of the 29 at the Beach Community Apartments. To date, we have now filled them all, and we have all 29 actually housed and filled as of this date. In day services, you can see that we've served 381 individuals that have come in for day support services during the course of these 5 months. Additionally, we have a health center on site, and we have served 212 persons that have come in for various and sundry health issues, including sick visits, family planning labs, immunizations, all the kinds of things that you would normally go to your primary care physician for. 95% of those people, of those 212 that have come in, have actually come through our homeless services system that Pam mentioned. They are people that are actually engaging in homeless services, and they are not community participants, although this center is actually open to the community. We have served over 13,500 meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner to participants that are actually living in the shelter and the family interim housing. And then the integrated services model, which is our program with collaboration with the Department of Human Services, has been a really great program for us to encourage people to connect that very same day to mainstream services on the 3rd floor. And there have been 322 referrals. 152 have gone to the financial aid division, where that's where they're getting their SNAP benefits, which are and TANF benefits. SNAP is your food stamps. 105 of those referrals have been referred to employment services, and then 87 referrals to behavioral health and path workers. Additionally, you should know that 90% of those referrals of those 322 referrals are coming through the homeless services system through the housing department on the first floor. And that, again, is not community, but that is actually coming through people that are engaging through the homeless service system.
Shannon?
Do we know how many of those 105 referred to employment services actually get jobs?
We don't have that data here, but I could probably get that from Elizabeth, absolutely. Well, I say that. Let me say that this, I'm sorry. I do have information for that. That's 105 connections to employment. They actually are not calling that placement because we asked that clarifying question, and they're saying we are connecting them to employers, but not necessarily for placement because they do not track the data of placement. So we did ask that clarifying question.
Would we be able to track that going forward? Because, I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is to have people with stable employment and
Correct.
stable housing. So if
Correct.
we're not, if I'm just saying go meet Joe at ABC store, I mean, that's a connection, but it's not real.
Right.
The DEF store, sorry.
Right. I will check with Human
Sorry, Barbara.
Services. I will share with you that we are working on an employment referral process now in our team that's going to be much more comprehensive, including Human Services on the third floor. But we're looking to bring in employers from our region, the Virginia Employment Commission, Opportunity Inc., all of the players in our region that are doing employment services and plan to have data for you later on that can talk to how many people are actually being served or actually have been employed. We're not there yet. In the last 5 months, we just have not had time to really concentrate on that effort, but Pam and I attended some training last week, and we got really excited about the potential for a plan that we want to move forward. So we can
think
bring
it's
that to you at a
important.
later date.
Yeah, it's important. I would love to see
Yep.
that and really see that tracked so that we can see the end result.
We agree with you 100%. It's very important. Thank you. So we couldn't do this work without volunteers in the community being involved. And so we have had 241 volunteers that have volunteered 1,791 hours at the HRC since September. That's pretty remarkable. And they include ambassadors, receptionists. We've had actually people come in and provide meals during holiday meals. The dining hall served meals, and we've had people come in and actually present and serve them. And we've had many volunteers that have connected to the point-in-time count that Andy talked to you about as well. The other piece of the community that you need to know about is we have a foundation that was established, VB Home Now, to help us move this work forward. We could not do it without the financial support and the community that really engages in this work alongside of us. There has been over $600,000 raised to date, and in December of last year, the City of Virginia Beach received a grant from VB Home Now so that we could put money towards the prevention and diversion program that Pam talked about that we just started, as well as the other 25 went out to other partners in our system that are helping end homelessness, make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring in our city. So we're excited about this new endeavor with VB Home Now. Also, we have a lot of community support. And so if you remember when we started the HRC back in August, we had a drive-through that we worked in partnership with the rec centers. And this Boy Scout troop was just one group that came in and provided lots and lots of in-kind donations so that persons moving into those 29 apartments had move-in kits to move in. We continue to do that with in-kind, but we ask that people will take things to a provider list because of storage limitations at the HRC, and so we have that information out in the community. We would be amiss if we just talked to you about numbers and about processes without talking to you about people. And so we wanted to leave you with this amazing story of Troy. And I wanted to show you who these people are in this picture before we move on, and we have a little video so you can see. So on your left is Todd Walker. He's the executive director of JCOC, and he is actually the provider that does the day support program as well as the shelter, emergency shelter program in our building. Next to him is Crystal Rivera. She's one of our outreach staff. Troy is in the middle. Next to him is, I missed her name. Leah, she's works upstairs in the IST in Department of Human Services with the Integrated Services team. And then his family members are the next two people that you'll see in the video. And so this is an amazing success story of how somebody connected to services in our system and was actually diverted and didn't have to come in and live in our system, but because of the wraparound services we had, it was a successful placement.
Mr. Clark was brought into us at Human Services by Crystal Rivera, who was one of the Department of Housing workers. She met with him and saw he had some further needs.
I did notice that he didn't have a shelter bed, and so we talked about him accessing the winter shelter. I was able to go back over to day services and talk with the staff over there and get him a permanent bed in winter shelter based on his vulnerability and his health.
So I kind of got permission to call her and just talked about what our concerns were, and she just kind of made the decision of what was best for him was to come and be reunited back with his family.
So many emotions going through my mind. I thank God that he's here. Thank you. Thank you for this program, being able to reach out to the ones who do want the help.
What I'm hoping for right now is just time with being welcome, being fitted to everything.
So thank you, and we thought we'd entertain questions, Pam and Andy or myself, if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
Rosemary.
I have a question that just came to me a couple of weeks ago, and I was wondering how do homeless people vote if they don't have an address to, if they're at the resource center, they have a place to mail their card to, but if, and they're citizens and they have the right to vote.
So we actually, back in September, was it September, we actually invited persons experiencing homelessness to come and sign up to vote. So we invited some people to come in. So yeah, because they use the HRC as their address, that's considered an address, and they are more than welcome to vote in the city of Virginia Beach, whether they are just a day service participant or they're living in the shelter.
That had really been troubling me because they have the right and they deserve to be able to vote.
Yep, and they do vote.
Good. That's good to know.
Yeah, yes. Okay, Sabrina, Aaron, then John.
So as I sit
And then Barbara.
here, sorry, as I sit here and listen to your presentation, I can only help but smile. And I smile because I'm appreciative of the work that you all do. I know that oftentimes in my interactions with people who are homeless on the street, my thought would always be if I could just help them do A, B, C, or D. So to be able to see all these resources in one location and to be able to help people in every aspect of their life, it's unheard of to be able to walk into a facility or call and get the services that you need that day. That's unheard of. And so I just want to say thank you very much for all that you all do. I really sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
What is the most of the homeless in the senior shelter, what is that attributed to? Is it drug abuse, housing, jobs? I mean, I know they come from all sorts of backgrounds, but mostly what do you all see?
So it depends. It could be, many of them have multiple complex issues. Some of them have been on the street for a long length of time. Some of them just have lost income due to physical issue. I mean, it really varies. I don't have the statistics. I don't know if Pam has them in her head to be able to speak to it. But the reasons are varied and multiple.
The reasons are varied, but I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand
so-
Here in this, what are you most faced with here?
So most of the time, homelessness is a multi-causality issue. So there's just not one singular, but for the individuals that come through our system, like Ruth said, the ones that are chronically homeless, homeless for a long, extended period of time, usually it occurs with a loss of income. And then there's a mental health issue that's involved that kind of like prevents them from going and live with a family member because it causes relationship issues. And so they have to leave that particular housing arrangement, and then they find themselves on the street.
All right, so are those the most cases that you see within the shelter here? 'Cause I know it can be multi-causality.
Yes. So most of the time, it's a loss of income or some mental health issue. And then the longer that they are on the streets, then they try to compensate or self-medicate with drugs, drug abuse or alcohol.
I was just waiting to hear.
John? Okay.
I know that's strange sometimes, right? The, two questions. One is, given that we've never had lower unemployment and tighter labor markets, and gosh knows when, maybe right after World War II, maybe, or during World War II, are you tracking to see, so that downstream you can find out, because probably if people aren't being placed in jobs in this environment, they probably have a structural skill deficiency probably, and how are those structural skill deficiencies, how do you refer people for those structural skill deficiencies for employment?
So the plan that we would like to implement going forward will have a 3-tiered approach. One would be for persons that are disabled and that have no ability necessarily to work, that will need a disability check, and we have an ability through a SOAR program to get people to connected to disability. The second would be for people that maybe have a disabling condition, but they can still work. And so there are providers in our community that actually work with those people, programs like the Eggleston Center, that will employ people that have disabilities that are still interested in working. And then the third phase would be, or our tier would be people that are actually employable in the marketplace. And so depending on where that person comes to us from, then we will put them in one of those 3 tiers based on their individual needs and then work with them on employment issues.
And my last question is, what percentage of your revenue sourcing is federal?
Oh, I'll let Andy speak to that. It's minimal.
So we actually have a presentation coming up in our department's budget where we have those figures in depth with a pie chart. It's a small percentage. The city has provided most of the funding for the operation, but we brought, where we can and where appropriate, several different federal sources and private sources as well.
Here's why I'm asking. Often the federal dollars are dollars that go directly to the eligible participant versus the overhead. And so therefore, when you take a 5 or 3% reduction, the impact on the actual client is much greater than what the percentage represents. So what I'm hoping to hear, maybe during your budget presentation, since we've seen the president's budget, who knows how it will survive, is making pretty good strident reductions in those areas, how that translates to gaps in terms of direct recipients versus the overhead that we're covering with city dollars. I'll be interested in understanding that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara?
Well, when we first started talking about addressing this, which, we've been talking about the homeless situation since the late 80s, and, we just haven't been able to get it together. And when we talked about this concept of doing it all at one stop and so forth, it sounded like, well, that sounds good, but we'll never really be able to get our arms around this great big issue. But to do this in 5 months of operation, y'all are just really on point, and that's great. And I've really not heard anyone complain about how much we spent on that building. And I think the fact that we have such a great building for our homeless really speaks to the caring nature of Virginia Beach. But my question, it seems like for some reason, I am seeing more people standing on the side of the road with that sign saying, "Help me, I'm homeless," since it opened than I did before. We're missing something. What are we missing? That we still have so many people around. I see them particularly in the town center, it seems, and I want to just take them over the couple of blocks to you folks, but we're doing something that, we're not doing something. What are we not doing?
So that is a very difficult, that's a circumstance that we have confronted, in fact, and we have engaged our community. We have something called HRC Engage, and we have invited our neighbors to talk with us, and most recently in April, they did tell us what you said, that there are people closer to the HRC because we're there. Some of the people are not homeless, they're just panhandling. That's definite. And then some people are homeless, but that's how they're spending their day, right? And then some people are connected to services in the building, and we're intending to work with the merchants and with the people to try to reduce that. As you know, we can't control people's movements or behavior, and we don't try to, but we can attract them back to the HRC, and we are definitely working with the merchants to say, here's what you can do to minimize the impact of people being at your place. It's definitely a touchy issue. I concluded the other day that there are two factors that are always true. We put services where homeless people need them, and homeless people are attracted to where the services are placed. Both of those are happening at the same time. And so we have to continually try to work on that.
Okay, Jim?
I got to tell you, this building and this whole process really impresses me. I think that what Andy, you've been able to do and with everyone is nothing short of a miracle. The fact that we have this great facility for people to utilize it, I think it's great. I mean, I think there's always going to be a core group of people that are not going to seek services for whatever reason, and your outreach is certainly laudable. Barbara, I tell you, I can point you to a number of first responders who can tell you they've gone into people's houses and seen those cardboard signs piled up on the floor, and they just pick one up and go outside, and that's how they make the mortgage payment, some of them. So, I mean, that's the way it is. I saw a guy on the street with a dog that had a city rabies thing on there, a new one, because I was stuck in traffic right there, and I looked, and I realized, well, if this guy can't afford to eat, but he's paying for his dog's license, that it may not actually be a homeless person, but the thing is that what y'all have done here is just absolutely phenomenal, and I think that this is something that the city should be very proud of, rightfully so.
Thank you.
Are we still doing the Pinky program at the oceanfront?
Yes, ma'am. We're not calling them pinkies anymore, however. It's the outreach team. And they have never stopped.
Pinkies, right?
I'm sorry.
We
Yeah,
did
they
call it
were.
the Pinkies, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And they had the pink shirts. Do you want to talk about the outreach team, Pam?
Sure. So the Pinkies, they were hired initially just to give a testimony to their lived experiences being formerly homeless. And then they came under the Department of Housing, and we wanted to elevate what they did and to be in alignment with the restructuring of our system. And so we wanted them to be a mobile unit of triage, screening, and assessment to bring it to the individuals that are unsheltered. And so that's exactly what they do. They can do triage, screening, and the assessment to quickly connect those to permanent housing.
So do they, what's the training they undergo for that?
So they've gone through a myriad of training. So they had to be trained on how to do this very specific assessment. They've had motivational interviewing training. They have had stages of change training. They've had trauma-informed care training and harm reduction training.
Thank you. One thing I
Barbara?
forgot. We still have the winter shelter program at the churches, though, don't we?
Yes, ma'am. This year, that is still operating. Judeo-Christian Outreach is our operator, and they're doing it just as they did.
Eventually, we can do away with that, right?
We are absolutely looking at that possibility. We want to still achieve the goal of making sure people are safe in the winter, but we would like to reduce the costs of that program, and so we're looking at it very closely.
We would be able to accommodate folks at the resource.
Potentially. Yes,
I mean,
ma'am.
we certainly don't want them out in the cold. But,
Correct. Right.
John?
It's not large enough to house everyone that we need to house in the winter.
That's
Housing
the issue,
program.
right?
we're going to get rid of the homeless problem, right? We're going to whittle it
So-
down some more.
So winter shelter has the temporary cots and churches, and we're going to look at whether there's an alternative for the next winter. We'll be working closely with the churches on that because they do a lot of great service by providing that program.
Okay, John?
When I was up in Henrico County, I noticed where they have a lot of people stand and collect money, they also have a city sign that they post. And it says, the city has a homeless shelter, blah, blah, and they put a phone number principally for the poor, letting you know that there's a source to discourage people from giving. You can't, the Supreme Court ruling, they have right to the sidewalk, they have a right to even solicit, in fact. But they don't, but that's what they've done. I don't know how effective it's been, that's another question, but it's something we might want to look at selected targeted areas, because there's a lot of ways to inform the behavior of the supplier,
That's
the
right.
cash, and some of these people we see them dropped off in the vans in the morning, I'm sure you've seen that, observed that as well, and they pick them up in the afternoon, and it is a professional business, and others are legitimate, I've seen both sides, but I did know that that was something that they did to discourage people, to instead refer them, and knowing there's a place they can go, so you can call and say, hey, because some of these people want help, but a lot of them, at some of these locations, I've seen a counselor with their cell phone, their dog, or being dropped off in a van and picked up, they are professional panhandlers, and they're allowed, but we can certainly discourage people from being monetary suppliers.
We totally agree, and in fact, we had the donation, we still have the donation meter program at the oceanfront, which says exactly that. Don't give to panhandlers, give to the program that supports people, who serves people who are homeless and in need. And we've actually talked with Ms. Wooten about better publicity for the existence of the center so that that exactly happens. We want that to happen as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, anybody else? All right, thank you very much, and
Thank
thank
you
you for
very
your
much.
great work.
Ruthie, Pam,
Thank you.
thanks, Andy. Next, we have our director, our interim director of finance, Alice Kelly. She's going to provide us a multi-subject briefing. First, the interim financial results, as well as to talk about OPEB and long-term debt. Kind of an expansion of her monthly briefings with the updates to the city council. Welcome, Alice.
Oh, I was going to say, well, Mayor Dyer, but he's not in the office. Vice Mayor Woods, city council members. Today, we're going to do the city results for year-to-date of February 28th. And as we do on interim statements, we report on a cash and unaudited basis. We're also I'm going to briefly mention our PAFR, our other post-employment benefits, bonded debt, and then some summary. Last week, we sent to the council the popular annual financial report, which we call the PAFR, and it's a report that is specifically designed to get some of the information out of the CAFR, but in a more readable format for citizens and people that are not public finance background to look at and read. And we plan on issuing that PAFR every year along with the CAFR. This year was our first year. We're a little bit late with this, but I hope you were able to read it and see what that was. For our February 28th result, we have the glide path of our revenues and our expenditures. And as we have said before, the red line is our expenditure history, 2 years, and the green line is tracking very closely to our red line. So because we don't necessarily spend or receive money on a 1/12 of a month, 1/12 of a year basis, we try to compare the history to make sure that we're meeting and seeing where we are with our actual expenditures based on the history that we've had in the past. So the red line is our expenditures, and then our blue line and our purple line. The blue line is our actuals, and the purple line is the history of revenues from the previous years. And both are tracking very close to history. The pie chart here is our revenue. We have collected about 49.2% of our budget, which is very close to what we've been collecting in previous years. And the next pie chart is our general fund expenditures. We've spent about 68.1% of the budget, which is very close to what it was, actually a little less than what it was historically. And we have previously given the city council a very detailed interim report if you want to have more details on those expenditures and revenues. There's been a lot of questions about unfunded liabilities and talk about long-term liabilities, and the city manager asked me to do a little bit of more briefing on the long-term liabilities. The city has about 6 main long-term liabilities listed here, and the first 5 are long-term liabilities that we determine the dollar amount by use of estimates and actuaries and engineers to come up with future costs or future estimates of these liabilities. Their unfunded liabilities are very similar to saving for college for your students, for your family, that you're estimating a cost that you're going to need to have in the future. You're going to save some money for it, but depending on how old your children are, you know, if you have a 4-year-old, you need less money than if you have a 17-year-old. And so you save that based on some estimates and costs. Our bonded debt is a little bit different, where the liability is the actual amount we signed, and we're pledging that we're going to pay that back. And so it's very much like a mortgage on your house, where we have that debt and we have to pay that mortgage every month, and that's what our bonded debt is more similar to. And so the 3 largest liabilities are pension, OPEB, and bonded debt. And last month we talked about the pension liability, and this month we're going to talk a little bit about OPEB and the debt. OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits, we have 2 different categories of OPEB liabilities. We have our single employer defined benefit plan, and we administer that in the city through our deferred comp board. And it's basically our retiree health insurance. And our assets are held in the VML VACO Trust. And we've had that trust since 2008, and we have about $72 million in it. I think Councilman Jones had said something last week about how Patty Phillips had been on that board and really have been looking over those funds.
There are some assets we have not yet transferred to that trust. This is a defined benefit? I thought we didn't transfer those one set of money because we couldn't move them to VSRS.
OPEB's not a defined benefit.
Well, she said defined. Okay,
Deferred
sorry.
comp.
I misread the line, sorry.
Okay. And so then the other category we have are multi-employer benefits. And so those are administered by VRS. And those are group life insurance, local disability program, and city and schools have both of those. We have the health insurance credit for schools only, and then we have the Line of Duty Act for the city only. And all of those are everything except the Line of Duty Act is we contribute to the unfunded liability. The Line of Duty Act we do as a pay-as-you-go.
Is there a reason why we do that?
If VRS determined to do that, so, thank you. Some other key terms, which are very similar to our pension, OPEB has actuarially determined contributions. And what the actuarially determined contribution that we pay every year is our normal cost, and that's the cost that we have for the people that we have right now as benefits, or participants, and the benefits that are to accrue during the plan year. And then we have the other portion of the actuarially determined contribution, which is the amortization of the unfunded liabilities. So that's the portion we're paying down our unfunded liability. And the actuary assumptions that we have are investment rate of return, inflation, payroll growth rate, mortality rates, and with OPEB, healthcare costs. And that gets a little bit more volatile than the pension costs. OPEB is a little bit different than pension in that we have a trust fund for our OPEB costs, but we really pay the benefits out of our healthcare fund. And so what happens is we pay the benefits, and that's the amount that's our actuarially determined contribution. And if we pay less benefits than our ADC, we contribute to the trust. If we pay more benefits, then our normal cost is lower than our ADC.
John.
And so this, I'm sorry.
I noticed in some years our makeup payment is going up. In fact, sometimes in the payroll has gone up. But I never can find something in the notes that identifies which of the actuarial assumptions either underperformed or if it's a negative, overperformed, to know what's the source.
Sure.
Is it payroll growth? Is it inflation? Is it underperformance? Where is that?
That is in our actuary reports, and sure.
Great,
and there's going to be more than one actuary report because there'll be the one that the city has for our health care, and then the ones the VRS has.
That'd be both of you.
Sure. So on the second slide, this is just the retiree health care insurance. I'm just going to go through the total. We have OPEB liability of $190 million. We have $72.6 million assets in our VML Vaco trust. So our net OPEB liability is $118 million. So we're 38.1% funded. And as I mentioned, our OPEB contribution, our total actual ADC was 6.2, but our actual healthcare costs were 7.4, and that's why the OPEB contributions are 7.4. So it seems like the schools and the city had the exact same ADC, but it was because our actual costs were 7.4, and our ADC was really 6.3.
Yeah.
I know we changed our policy, so the universe of people is now pretty much a shrinking
Sure.
number with mortality
Sure.
that qualify and are accounted for under this number, that's
Sure.
correct?
Yes. So the footnote here is our liability increased 26 from June 2017 due to changes in assumption. About $4 million was our decrease because of those changes of assumption. The other one was we actually took the retiree actual health care costs. So before GASB 75 came into effect, they would look at the retirement payments, not the actual claims. And now when they looked at the claims, that caused an increase, a major increase in assumptions. That will go down eventually. It won't be as volatile as it was this year.
So this
Now,
eventually will age out.
this will age out.
Thank you.
But it's going to be a little less steady than the pension one will be because the health care goes up and down a little bit more.
Thank you very much.
All right. For city, we have three other, so the healthcare costs were in our retirement trust. The city, GLI, LODA, and VLDP are in the VRS trust. And we have $76 million of OPEB liability.
Could you explain those acronyms?
Oh, sure. Group life insurance, line of duty, and Virginia long-term disability program. And so the state covers some of this, and that's why we put it in VRS. And so our total liability for those three for the city is 76.2. We have a net position in the VRS trust in 25.2, and so our net OPEB liability for these three are 51 million, and so percent funded is 33.1%.
If I could, I hate to ask so many questions. You said line of duty was pay as you go.
Pay as you go.
So that means in the year that ended, we paid out $25.3 million for line of duty in that year. So it's a liquidated liability.
Sure.
It's just an expenditure.
Right. There's a little bit left in there, but it's more timing difference than anything else.
Where would we know the number of recipients that $25.3 million was paid out to? Where is that captured?
That actually is in the actuary report also.
I look forward to reading that.
Yes. All right. And then the schools has slightly different health insurance, or OPEB. They have the general liability, they have the long-term disability, and then have the healthcare insurance credit for teachers. And so the total liability is $140 million. The net position in VRS is $39.8, $100 million OPEB liability for this, and it's 28.3% funded. And so this chart is how the OPEB liability for city and schools will be paid down. So the ADC, the actuarially determined contribution we pay every year, is a portion normal cost and then a portion of the unfunded liability. The unfunded liability portion is about 56% of our total costs, and so we're going from 46 million down to zero over the course of 28 years, and so by 2046, our unfunded liability will be paid off. Now, this is a very smooth line. The actuarial, I asked the actuary to help me do this, and he said there's no way we can judge the ups and downs, but over the course of time, it will go down.
Yeah.
Since in 2033 is when, well, Medicare is back, Medicare is back in 2027.
I'm sorry.
2027, Medicare is no longer to be able to meet its full obligations and only pay a percentage on the dollar, and Social Security pays even less further out. I'm just curious, what's the sensitivity analysis for every 1% reduction? Because I know sometimes it's what Medicare doesn't pay.
Sure.
The city health insurance does for those who are covered.
Sure.
So do we know the sensitivity analysis for every 1% change in Medicare's contribution, what our liability increases for our retirees?
No, I don't know that.
That would be a good
offhand.
number when we're talking to people like Gloria and other people to know, because that is on the horizon That is not far away. That's before 2030 that happens. Social Security is in 2033, which starts paying 77 cents on the dollar in 2034, but Medicare is inside the window of, I think it's 2024, 2025, somewhere in there, it starts running in the red.
Okay. All right. Well, taking that aside, how our ADC is calculated and how we pay down our unfunded liability over the course of, we have 28 more years, it'll go down to zero. And so what credit rating agencies and what GFOA and a lot of other public entities say, it's not necessarily the size of your unfunded liability, it's your ability to pay down the unfunded liability and save up and make sure you have the ADC. And as long as you're paying your actuarially determined contribution, that's what they consider. And so a lot of times you'll hear about cities that they have almost the same percentage funded that Virginia Beach has, but they can't seem to come up in their budget to pay the ADC costs. And that's the issue that you a lot of times see in cities that have very similar funding status that Virginia Beach does have.
The reason why I mentioned it, because if those become obligations we want to meet, and based on what your economy is, those become opportunities that cost either declining services or service growth you can't have because you got this as a must-pay bill. And you got to start looking at your pie chart is what's your must-pay bills versus your discretionary money. And you can be like those other cities if those cost curves shift to the right. That was my point. There is a vulnerability out there for everyone, and you can't wish it away because it's a demographic fact. And the trustee reports are out from the Fed, so everybody can read them.
Okay. All right. The other long-term liability that we have is bonded debt. And so we have two different types of bonds, tax-supported debt. And under the tax-supported debt, we have GO bonds that have a few different types of bonds. Then we have appropriation-backed debt, which are public facility revenue bonds. And then we have fee and self-supporting debt, which are enterprise revenue bonds, which are water and sewer and the stormwater fund. And so this chart is very detailed, but it gives a summary of our outstanding indebtedness since the past 3 years. And so our total net tax-supported debt is $932.1 million, and our total debt is $1.222 billion. The next chart is a pie chart of our outstanding debt by purpose. Our general government CIP has about 51.2% of our total debt. Schools have about 25% of the debt. Water and sewer 16, stormwater is 3.4%, and then our agricultural reserve fund is about 3.8. Our debt service that we pay every year in FY18, our debt service $152.3 million principal and interest, and our FY19 estimate is $156.4 million. Recently, we've issued some bonds, our GEO bond and our PFRB bonds for 2018. In 2019, we issued 29.5 for stormwater revenue bonds, and in FY18, we had 71.5 million refunded in our GEO bonds. In FY18, we still have authorized but unissued bonds of $444 million and 166 for our revenue bonds. So we haven't issued those bonds because we haven't done the projects yet to need the cash for the bonds.
In the future, could you break out GO bonds from that are backed and issued by the charter from those that are issued outside the charter?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's about half and half, but yes, we can do the exact amount. One of the strong indicators of our credit is that we rapidly retire our bonds. And so in FY18, this is our percentage of principal retired. And as you can see, we issue 20-year bonds. At year 10, we have 78 retired of our bonds, which is a nice rapid repayment, and credit rating agencies really like to see that. For our revenue bonds, we have slightly longer time, and by 10 years of a 25-year bond, we've already paid back almost 50% of those bonds. The city is one of the well, actually, it's the only city in the area that is rated AAA and for our GO bond, and this is our 9th year that we've been rated by all 3 major rating agencies. They really comment on our strong economy, our excellent financial management practices, and then our ability to control expenditures and achieve balanced results. And they also, all 3 of them, comment on our modest debt liability. As a comparison for our GO, our PFRB, water and sewer, and stormwater bonds, our ratings are very high in all categories. The next slide shows some of the rating agent criteria and for our debt. And so each of the rating agencies have a proprietary formula that they use. And so we don't know exactly how they weight every single element of these, but they do all look at economy and the tax base, our finance, our fund balance as a percentage of revenue, our cash balance as a percentage of revenue. They look at our management, our operating history, institutional framework, our flexibility to meet different things in the environment, our debt and our pension. And then they are also looking at climate event and risk mitigation. That is becoming a major factor in what they look at in terms of debt and our rating. In January, I'm not going to read this paragraph, but in January 2019, Moody's did a report on all U.S. cities over the major 50 U.S. cities, and they basically commented that Virginia Beach is really doing a strong financial management and adhering to policies and really looking at our flooding and our debt. And, you know, as City Council's major #1 priority, that's something that they're really taking a look at. Our summary of our debt management policies, that we have established guidelines, and that as of 2018, we are very in compliant with all 4 policies, that our debt service to general fund expenditures are under 10%, we're at 7.7%, that our net debt value to the full value of our taxable properties is less than 3.5%, we're at 1.7. Our overall net debt per capita is less than 3,000. There's no greater than 3,000, it's 2,000. And our overall net debt per capita personal income is no greater than 6.5. And we have pictorial charts of how our net debt service as a percentage of general government expenditures is less than 10%. And we've been well below that goal or that target, and actually have been reduced slightly in the past few years. And
Council may recall from the 5-year forecast, I believe it's in 2021 and 21-22, that number goes to 9.9%. If you go back and look at your 5-year forecast. So as we look at the upcoming budget, it really constrains our ability to address flooding, because that was before we even looked at increasing. So that number, while going down, quickly spikes back up towards 9.9% for 2 years in a row.
Okay. Our net debt per capita is under 3,000, and that has been staying about even. And then we have a comparison of the debt indicators for the other cities, and we are comparable, very favorably compared to the other cities in the area. Our per capita income is much higher than the other cities, as well as our percentage of debt service to general government expenditures is low too.
Jeff?
Just a comment, while our per capita income is lower than Chesapeake because of the per capita income includes a lot of investment and other kind of incomes, if you look at average and median salary, which is about what wages people make versus other than wage income, it's actually higher in Chesapeake. That's not good nor bad, but you could draw a wrong conclusion by relying on just per capita income, which is not the best indicator of household income or household financial health.
And I think when we do debt indicators, we take into account a lot of different indicators. It's not just one. We take into account the percentage of our budget, the percentage of our assessed value, how we pay down our debt. So I think we don't rely on just one indicator,
I just want people to appreciate when you're doing comparisons that could draw you to a conclusion that's not represented on a more representative data of household financial well-being.
Okay. So our long-term liability summary, we have conservative financial management, which helps us get a AAA rating from our rating agencies. We meet our obligations. We make our actuary-determined contributions to our trust funds. Over 50% of our ADC is to fund our unfunded liabilities, and rating agencies take notice of that and really give us credit for that. We pay our annual debt service. We're not late. We pay our debt service as much in line with what we owe. And then we annually review our debt indicators, and we keep up with our actuarial calculations. Our city auditor even helps us review the calculations and the assumptions, make sure that we're on track with that. Our next step is our proposed budget is next week. We have our March interims in April 23rd. We adopt a budget on May 14th, and then we close out the FY19 fiscal year on August 15th.
Hey, any questions?
Yeah.
John?
Could you go back to slide 4, please? Apologize for not answering the question at the time. In the expenditures, are you including the ending fund balance that is then expended out? Because we're showing that revenues equal expenditures, and each of these years, we always have an ending fund balance. So clearly, it
Yeah,
either
we
has
put
to
that in
be
there.
adjusting, or the ending fund balance is in the expenditure line, or you're adjusting actual expenditures minus the ending fund balance. Which does that line represent?
No, we put the money in the expenditures.
And that would be interesting on this graph in the future, if we could see from the past, because I know the city manager was going to tell us, he hasn't yet, but I remember him saying he was going to. I guess we're going to be surprised on the 26th. But there is an ending fund balance number like for the schools, so that expenditure represents, in 100%, there was a surplus at the end of the year that we didn't give back to the taxpayer and that we spent somewhere else. And that doesn't come across, if you look at that line, doesn't report that we actually underspent our budget, but we're taking the surplus and showing it as an expenditure. That, I understand why you do it, but it does leave that out. It doesn't let the public realize that we under-executed actual revenues and then used them in the next budget year, or appropriated within that year in a different way.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. Thanks, team. And so I asked Alice to provide all that data because the next briefing is a very, very important briefing. And what we're going to present to you is our stormwater utility fund. And we're going to expand that briefing today to address and transition the way that we think about a capital improvement program aspect and delivering of projects in the stormwater fund. The stormwater fund has historically and always will have 3 components, and Mark's going to address that. And he's going to address that in the terms that we normally have discussed stormwater, and that's in a 6-year project presentation perspective.
If you can hold on, we've been going for a couple hours. I know this is important and we're going to be here. Could we just take a quick 5-minute break?
Of course, Mayor.
Okay?
Absolutely.
You got it. Thank you.
So we'll take a break.
That's what happens. You got a 68-year-old mayor. How you doing?
Thanks, guy.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure. Yep. Yep. I don't want you squirming in your chairs.
Okay.
So members of council, on our executive session, one item did drop off, so.
Folks,
On our executive session, we did have one item drop off, so we've got ample time for this discussion. We've been working diligently since the retreat, and since we heard from the council a desire to say, hey, look, when are we gonna do all these projects? How are you gonna do all these projects? And how are we gonna fund all these projects? And so we've been in the bullpen now for 5 or 6 weeks, working diligently to come up with not only the 15-year work plan that gets all these projects done, but we're going to share with you at the end of the briefing some very major spreadsheets that you're going to be able to actually see work plans. You're also going to see a transition from a 6-year CIP today to talk about a 15-year CIP that provides all the resourcing necessary to deliver a $1.3 billion program locally funded in order to attack a recurrent flooding issue. And so this is a lot of work by a lot of people, both on the finance side, the budget side, and the engineering side to deliver today's briefing. And so I've asked our DPW, Mark Johnson, to lead this conversation, and I hope you find it informative.
Mayor, members of council, thank you for letting me be here to talk about the Stormwater Utility Fund. Today, we're going to talk about the operating budget and then CIP funding. And under CIP funding, we're going to talk about the proposed FY20 CIP and 3 future funding strategies. Just want to give you a quick overview. I know you've seen this slide, but it just gives you the magnitude of the system that we operate and maintain. Our 3 stormwater components are water quality, flood control, and operations and maintenance. We're going to start with the FY19 approved budget. Under revenues, you see the revenue is generated by 99% of the ERU fee. If you look at expenditures, I'm just going to talk about the largest 4 pieces of the pie, and that is operations and maintenance at 32%. PAYGO, $8 million goes to the CIP. If you go counterclockwise over to debt service, we had debt service at $3.9 million, and then transfers at $3.3 million, and that's indirect costs and the billing system. For the FY19 Stormwater Fund, the ERU rate is at 45.8. In the city code, the rate's scheduled to increase by 2.5 cents each year up to FY23. In addition, there's 1 cent of the real estate tax that is going to the CIP and $990,000 of the Agricultural Reserve Program going to Southern Canals Project. Now, the goal for the proposed operating budget for FY20 is to increase the amount of funding that can go to the CIP. In other words, try and fund the CIP as much as we can. So what we're proposing is to shift $14.2 million of stormwater operating expenses to the general fund. We do this by redirecting the 1 cent real estate tax to cover operating expenses at $5.7 million. In addition, we propose a 1.5 real estate tax increase, which will cover an additional $8.5 million. Also, we're looking at increasing the ERU rate from 2.5 to 3.5 cents for 6 years each year. This will give us an CIP PAYGO amount of $21.5 million, with the remaining expenses in the operating budget at $24 million. So if you look at the pie charts associated with the proposed operating budget, you now see the fee still covering 99%, but if you look at expenditures, the PAYGO towards CIP is the largest at 47%. Again, you have transfers for indirect costs and billing. Operations and maintenance remains in the fee at $13 million. Operations inspections remains at $979,000. And then you have debt service that increased, and that's to cover the debt service that is associated with the bonds we just sold, and a small amount for reserves. This is just a scorecard to track what has been moved to the general fund and what remains in the enterprise fund. Basically, we shifted project management, street sweeping, construction and engineering, surface water quality compliance, and mosquito control, and just a portion of operations and maintenance over to the general fund. Again, operations and maintenance and inspections remains. The debt service increases to $5.5 million, but now you have an increase in the pay-go funds going to the CIP from $8 million in FY19 to $21 million in FY20. Just want to show you this ERU history graph here. The blue is what we have today. The red is what the line would look like at 3.5 cents increase per year over the 6-year period, and it'll top out at 66.8 cents. Just wanted to mention, in addition to looking at this work, we are also doing an ERU study. The ERU study is to take a look at our current ERU square footage, which is 2,269 square feet, and see if that is still a reasonable number for this year, for what we have out in the world of Virginia Beach today. It's also going to look at trying to identify tiers in the square footage of the residential properties. Probably we're going to end up with 4 tiers, and then based on those tiers, we're going to look at the equitability of the rate and see if it should be more apportioned with respect to the impervious area that's out there. That work is ongoing. We're also utilizing, I'll call it today's technology. Back in 1990, when we did the original work, I'll tell you, we used planimetrics, we used aerial photography, and we did some in-field sampling to determine what we had. This time we're using GIS, LIDAR. We're using all the technology that we can grab to really get a good handle on the impervious area associated with residential properties. And our goal is to get this work all completed by January of 2020. Now, for the capital improvement funding, again, the goal was to increase the CIP amount. Just want to show you the historical funding levels for the CIP starting in 17. In FY17, the CIP was $135 million. In 18, it rose, and that's due to the 2.5 cent fee increase at $267 million. FY19, it basically stayed relatively the same at $280 million. Now, for this proposed year, with the shifting of the operating expenses and the 3.5 cent for 6 years, we're able to grow the CIP to $395 million. If you just take a quick look at the distribution between the 3 components, you'll see flood control over to the right under total of 6 years. Flood control is $227 million. Operations and maintenance is $113 million. Water quality is $54.6 million. And just to give you a clue of the increase, between FY19 and FY20, it's a 41% increase. Between FY17 to FY20, it's a 191% increase. Now I want to talk about long-term funding strategies. This bullseye right here, where we are today is in the center, FY19 at 280. We want to get to the next outer ring, FY20 at 395 million, and the strategies we're going to talk about will get us hopefully to 1.3 billion, and maybe start to see how we could possibly start to begin funding sea level rise projects. I want to start by talking about the fee increase associated with the first strategy. What we're looking at is extending the 3.5 cent fee increase per year from FY26 to FY32, and it would top out at 91.3 cents. Again, that strategy is built on the proposed FY20 FY funding, plus the 3.5 cents for each year between FY26 and 32. So if you look at the available funding, you have the 395 from FY20. It gives you an additional 490 million to top out at $885 million for the CIP. Take a quick look at the projects. The list we have here today is the flood control projects, and we've got the summaries of operations, maintenance, and water quality down at the bottom. The main two numbers to look at is at the bottom of FY20 funding and FY2032 funding, where you see in FY2025 funding, $395 million. That's basically the FY20 program, and $490 million. That's the additional funds you can generate with the fee increase. Now, to see how we can fund all three components, we always look at operations and maintenance to fund that first. Then we look at water quality. Then we look at what we can fund at flood control. So with this strategy, we can fund operations and maintenance at $356 million. We can fund water quality at $125 million. We can fund flood control up to $699 million, and that leaves us of a flood control shortfall of $296 million. So we looked at strategy number 2. Strategy number 2, again, expands the CIP, what we call as a 13-year program, and that's starting at FY20. If you talk about the 15-year program, you're starting at FY18. The strategy builds on the proposed CIP for FY20, plus strategy 1, plus now we introduce a 2.5 cent real estate tax increase in FY23, 26, and 30. That generates approximately $420 million in general government debt. Of course, coverage ratios and charter bond capacities will determine the exact amount. Again, same chart as in strategy 1 and strategy 2. Please look at the bottom, or totals of FY2025 funding and FY26-32 funding, where you can see the combined total is basically $1.245 billion. Okay. Due to math again, projected funding is 1.3. O&M gets funded at 415 million. Water quality at 129 million. Flood control is now fully funded, and it leaves us with a remainder that we can devote to ongoing flood control or start to work on sea level projects at 59.7 million. We went in a little bit further, and this was trying to get us out to the orange of the target. And we also expanded it to a 21-year program. In other words, the program will run from FY20 to FY40. So we built on the proposed FY20 CIP, strategy 1, strategy 2. We expanded the CIP to FY40, and in FY28 we started to devote funding from the roadway CIP at an amount of $26.7 million. So you can see from the project funding, the combined total of that is $2.2 billion. So again, funding of strategy 3. Look at the bottom line of FY 2025 funding. You'll see $525 million, and that takes you through strategy 2, and strategy 3 gives you another $720 million. Strategy 3 gives you $490 million from FY 30 to 40. So if you look at the numbers, again, O&M now is at $766 million. Water quality is at $226 million. Flood control projects are at $743 million. but that gives you a capacity to start looking at sea level rise projects at $476 million. Just want to give you the summary here. Summary again, FY20 through 25 is a 6-year program, which gives you a funding availability of $395 million. Strategy 1 is a 13-year program, which gives you a funding availability of $885 million, but you're still short $296 million for flood control projects. Strategy 2 is a 13-year program, raises $1.3 billion, gives you roughly $60 million to devote to sea level rise projects, and then Strategy 3 is a 21-year program, which allows you $476 million to go to sea level rise projects. In summary, the proposed FY20 CIP continues City Council's goals to increase funding to the stormwater program. Strategy 1 started to expand the CIP to a 13-year program. Strategy 2 fully expands the CIP to a 13-year program. And strategy 3 will really start to get you to fund sea level rise projects. Now I'm going to ask City Engineer Phil Pullen to hand out the spreadsheets that we have that are based on strategy number 2.
Okay, Mr. Wood, you got a question?
Wait till they're done.
Okay.
Mr. Moss, I have questions while we're done as well. Thank you very much.
What's being handed out now is strategy 2.
Thank you, sir.
This is the $1.3 billion work plan to get the projects completed so that the public will have an opportunity to understand what the projects are. Let me have one, 'cause I got an older version, thank you. And what we want to do is make sure that folks who are worried about when they're going to get a flooding project done has an opportunity to say, this is when design will be done, and we're able to go to construction, and we're also able to tell the industry, the construction industry, that the city of Virginia Beach is going to invest in the largest infrastructure program ever contemplated in order to defeat this enemy, and to do it in that bullseye form, that the center part is to tackle the recurrent flooding issues that we are very familiar with, and then as we do the analysis and we pick the solutions through Dewberry, through the Corps of Engineers 3+3 studies, and we pursue a cost participation from the state and the federal government, because the best we're raising, based on 8.5 cents of real estate, based on a continual increase in the ERU rate, which goes into the stormwater, which allows us to invest in more projects because we can use debt, and we can get $10 for every dollar worth of debt that we invest in. We can build a program of this proportion. But that $2.2 billion Mark just briefed you is not enough to defeat sea level rise. It is enough to allow you to look, first of all, the rating agencies in the face and say, we're fully committed to a program to defeat this enemy, that we are putting our local funding on the table, and to go to the state and to go to the federal government with the defense industry here in this city and say, we need cost participation. And we will be establishing the local cost share 50% requirement that allows us to have that conversation at both a state and a federal level. And so what we need to do, like all major programs, no matter whether it's a ballistic nuclear submarine program or it happens to be a standardized stormwater program, you've got to be able to lay out your projects over a period of time, and you've got to create a financing strategy to do that. one of the most important charts that Mark just presented to you is to address some of your concerns about the regressive nature of the ERU system, the stormwater fee. We acknowledge that today it is a regressive system. But if you are able to go through with the new technologies that we have, with the ability to bring drone technology to validate an appeal that someone might say, well, you've got me in category 3. And if you just visualize with me 4 bands, an A, a B, a C, and a D. And suppose you pick one of those bands, let's say B is 1.0, meaning it is the ERU. And in that spread, and let's just hypothetically say from 2,700 square feet, or let's say 2,500 square feet to 3,000 square feet, it's 1.0. If your impervious surface at your residence is in there, you'll pay 1.0 the rate on there. If you have a smaller house or a smaller impervious footprint, your ERU rate will be 0.8 of the ERU rate, meaning you won't pay as much as somebody in the B group because you own a smaller house. You have less impervious. You're contributing less stormwater to the issue. On the other end, if you're in the C group, you're maybe 3,000 square feet to 3,800 square feet. You'll be maybe 1.25 of the ERU rate. Why? Because you have a greater impervious amount. You're contributing more to it. You should pay more towards the stormwater solution. And if you're in the D group, meaning that you have one of those very large houses with lots of tennis courts and driveway and roof line, then maybe your rate is 1.5 of the ERU rate, and you pay more associated. And so that's the course of action I've asked the Public Works Department to pursue and use LiDAR. We fly every year over the city, and the footprint of LiDAR is now within 2 inches of elevation. It has a very prescriptive and a very efficient tracking system. And we will be able to, through GIS, be able to rate people's residences, something we've never been able to do, to say, this is your impervious rate, and you would fall within this. And we'll provide all these briefings to council, and we'll walk you through the analysis and all that thing. But what'll happen is, you'll have an opportunity to appeal it. And if you're a homeowner and you say, look, I went out with a wheel, and I marked mine, and I think I'm not in B, I'm really in A, well, there are drone technologies out there today with software that for a fixed price that we will probably negotiate a contract service provider, you can appeal, and you can agree to sign up for an appeal. And we'll go fly with that service provider. They'll fly a drone around your house real quick. They'll lay that software on top of that, and they'll be able to give you an assessment of whether or not a true assessment. And we'll figure out ways to make this all a viable solution. If you do fall within it, then the cost of that appeal will ride to us. If you don't fall within that appeal, then you'll pick up the $115 or whatever it took for that drone to fly and put it on their application. And so I think that what I'm telling you today is we're not going to create $1.3 billion worth of all new requirements, because this is a new requirement, sea level rise and stormwater. We're not going to be able to do that by doing away with all our other programs and dumping all the money into it. It will require a combination of all three. We will have to increase the stormwater fee. We will have to dedicate real estate taxes, and we will have to wean ourselves off our road program and our other CIPs and shrink their footprint in the latter years to take on the immense additional $1 billion beyond what we're proposing up here at $1.3 billion just to get to the recurrent flooding program that these two charts are showing you, the water quality and the major increase in the backlog of O&M, so that we can tackle that starting tomorrow to preclude flooding that is occurring with our regular intense storms that we're having today. And so if you look at what your current tax rate is, your current tax rate is $1.0025. And if you add your 1.5 cent that I'm adding here, you're now gonna be 1.5 cent, you're gonna be at $1, what am I gonna be at, David Bradley? $1.0175. And we're saying beyond this, you're gonna add 3 more increments of 2 cents over 23, 26, and 30. They might move a year here or move a year there, but our projection is you need that additional 6 cents. 6 cents to that now takes your city's tax rate to $1.0775. Your ERU rate continues to grow because it's paying for the stormwater program. And it has removed a portion of the regressiveness nature of it, and it has everybody still paying into the program. And as these projects are designed, as these projects go to construction, the amount of debt that we can take on is still retained for the lion's share inside the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. But eventually, we're going to have to use general obligation debt to pay the remainder of those costs. And those metrics that you saw Alice briefing you, the capacity, the gap that you have, when we need the general fund to fall into place in the next 15 years from now, that capacity will have weaned itself off of the road projects and be available for us to commit to the stormwater program. And we believe that this is a sound financial strategy
Okay, Jim
to deliver
Wood,
this work.
So
and then John.
the difference between this and the Dewberry amount, which was another billion or two
3.7
beyond
was
that,
Dewberry.
is the sea level rise piece.
That's what we're working on with the additional monies, yes, sir.
So so when I'm, just a quick glance at this, it looks like that like the Tide Gate at Shore Drive and Back Bay and that sort of thing, any of that kind of gating areas or Elizabeth River, all those different areas we're talking about, potentially, those aren't considered flood projects, but they're more in the sea level rise piece.
You're in the orange part of the bullseye. You're starting to get to those blockage elements that are gonna require cost share partners to help us
But
deliver.
kind of when I get to, I don't know how you separate sea level rise from recurrent flooding here. I mean, I know there's ways to do certain of it, but obviously sea level rise is a function of flooding not working to some degree because it backs up to where the pipes are now. I think specifically along, Shore Drive in my district where those, and you've gone and put the little, like the stoppers in that stop the backflow and that sort of thing to allow the water not to come back up.
Correct.
So that's kind of a combination of both heavy rain and sea level rise as well. So it kind of looks like the two do connect.
You're correct, Jim. Many of those recurrent flooding projects, like Windsor Woods, like building a gate and putting a pump station, is stopping the tidal impacts of the western branch that goes through the culverts underneath I-264. It's dual purpose, but we call them recurrent flooding because they are real. Those are projects that we know now. Those are the risks that we currently have in our city today, and that with any given storm, any given intensity, we need to have an infrastructure program that defeats those in the inner heart of our city.
And just following up, so when you're talking about this, you're talking about the potential of federal funding and hitting 50% mark. So all of these assume zero federal funding at this point?
Of the 1.3.
Right.
Right, but when
Everything you showed us is zero federal funding.
Correct.
So if federal funding does come through, then that changes.
Those supplant, those monies get continued on, and those will be cost share for other projects that are coming that we haven't even begun to design.
So our plan is that we're going after this independently, and the federal government money would be found money that we would use for other things.
Yes, we are working with Admiral Phillips. We have told her the requirements to assist localities, and I think as the lead city in the region, stepping up to create the local cost share and committing to the long-term infrastructure program that we're presenting today demonstrates not only to the state but to the feds that we are serious about defeating this enemy.
Thank you. John, then Lewis.
Well, this is a strategy. It is not the only funding strategy. I think that point needs to be made, but it is one. I'm glad to hear that people are now acknowledging that the stormwater fee, which I've been saying for decades, is a regressive fee and not tied anyway to impact. But as an observation, I do think before we expend a lot of staff time on a methodology and doing a lot of work, that there ought to be first some consultant with the people that have to explain it. House size isn't the same thing as lot size. If you have a 4,000 square foot house on a 120,000 square foot lot, I don't care how big your house is, you are absorbing a lot of water. So the algorithm that has to look at that cannot be one dimensional, and I'm sure it would not be. But I think before we start expending huge resources, at least at the beta version or at some conceptual level, the basic parameter values that you think you're going to have in this algorithm, it would be probably wise to run them by this body to see whether or not those are an equation that we could explain to the public and would not be seen to be more equitable on the surface, but then has the same regressive effect. And so I think that's one observation. When we say roads, the real thing that is consuming and pushing us above in 2021 and 2022 up to 9.9% isn't roads. It's the dome site and it's the city's new city hall. We could be more aggressive in these earlier years if in fact we relooked at what we allocated our debt to and maybe matched our priorities. So there are choices. Also, I know we talked at the retreat about a bond referendum for stormwater. The reason why I mentioned it, I don't know how many of you people follow the financial news every day, but the 10-year note on the Japanese yen is negative interest on their 10-year government debt. And also the debt in most of the countries in Europe is under 2%. And ours was 2.6. And our last bond debt went 0.7% over the 10-year Treasury note at the time. And those were not even GOB bonds, those were revenue bonds, which trade about 25 basis points higher. So if you were looking at a time frame when you were trying to get the lowest cost for the highest volume, issuing debt, you would want to be front-loading a lot of your debt issuance because of just the cost of borrowing, looking forward and looking when the Feds, as you go out here, and you only have to look at the CBO report, that number starts getting ugly in the out years, and now you're paying more in interest and your costs start to rise. So I think there needs to be a financial strategy from a funding. And when you mentioned about acquisition, you're absolutely right. But one of the key parts of is what is your acquisition strategy? I can say this because it's for the public record. If you buy 10 of something, you can get the 10th one free because you're buying a high volume and you're providing a steady stream of work. So I think we need to, for this volume of work, we need an acquisition strategy to find out how much, if you're offering a huge, and you can have all the provisions for set aside a minority, because we do it all the time with big projects, way bigger than this, I can assure you. But you go out there and you make this commit, and you have all these years out there, but the out years, are program dollars, but you have acquisition. You can dramatically, because you have each of these then don't become individual mobilization and demobilization projects. You have a continuous workforce over a decade, and you really do drive efficiencies to get a better value for your dollar. That's just a given. So I think not just but we need an acquisition strategy, and we really need to have some assumption about the financial strategy of looking when the best time to issue debt is for. And I think those are key. Now, I applaud you for moving the mosquito fund out. I've often thought that wasn't the right answer, so kudos for that. Never should have been there. But I do think that it makes more sense to me if we recognize the fee is regressive, but we won't have the new fee until January. I'm inclined, and I'll be looking, to find the offsets in the general fund so that until we have the better fee, we don't keep charging people with a fee we know is regressive. If in January we're going to know, we can make a mid-course correction. These are things, but I think the acquisition strategy could save us a lot of money and also increase minority participation at the same time because you have a big enough workload to make that work. And I do believe a bond referendum in 2020 is still something we should pursue. I think it's the only way we can move that timeline to the left and also make the project enough money and out there at one time to get the economy of scale for the workforce for these projects. Because workforce is a key constraint today. I'm sure many of you know. You know, Seattle is the most busiest city ever because it's got 9 boom cranes, and that's how they do about industrial constructions, look at the number of boom cranes per city. But there is and the bigger, the longer your workload, the easier it is for the people to acquire the workforce, the stable the workforce, the productivity of the work. You know, I'm telling you all the things you already know. And I think the acquisition strategy is key to making the numbers make sense.
Okay, Louis.
Well, I want to talk about strategy from a standpoint of getting federal funding and state funding. And that is that somehow when we do this, actually put this plan into place, we've got to be able to offset the thinking that's going to occur both on a state level and a federal level is that we already have it funded. Because if we've already funded the program, there's going to be less sentiment towards helping us get federal and state money. And so I think we need to think about that when we set up our time frames for this. On the other hand, if we want to ignore the issue, which Jim brought up, and that is that, you know, this plan basically says we're not going to count on federal and state money, but we're going to fund it ourselves. If that's the strategy that we have to take in order to make this whole plan work over the period of 20 years, then maybe we ought to bite the bullet now and set in place the financing that's going to pay for it now and set the time frame for it. So, because right now the sentiment of the public is in support of taking care of stormwater. And if we wait over time and we don't have any serious storms or impacts in the next few years, the sentiment's going to go away. And so I just think from a standpoint of being able to put the funding in place and do the tax increases that we've got to do to make it work, we ought to put the plan into effect now and get it going, because as time goes on, hopefully we won't have a major Matthew again, but for a long time. But if we don't have one, the sentiment's going to go away, and we're going to have trouble financing this. So I'm just saying, you know, the time to act is now, and not put it off, and not put the financing off, in my view.
Yep. John.
I want to ditto Lewis's remarks, so the same remarks you made at the retreat when you said you didn't think the state and feds were going to be a source of help in the near term. And if you only look at the deficits that the federal government is dealing with, at best you might get private loans with subsidized interest, but grants are not going to come in to solve our problem. I think you are right, which is why I think we talked a lot about what can we do, but can we have a referendum in 20 to see if the public wants to commit to the financial implication of doing that. But I do agree, moving the programs to the left, bigger finance will get a bigger bang for the buck, both with the community and our long-term attractiveness to business as well. That's my personal belief.
Jim, then Rosemary.
And I would go back to what Louis said, because I'd submit to you that I think already the sentiment is not as strong as it was. And the reason I say that is it's like Civic League season for me now, I guess. I've been going to Civic League meetings, multiple ones, then I've got one on Saturday, I've got them 3 or 4 the next couple of weeks. And one of the things is I'll sit there and talk about, and this is great information to take out to the Civic Leagues, as is the popular financial report, people like that too. But I'll tell you, so I'll talk about this, and, people, their eyes will glaze over a little bit, but a lot of times it's talking about numbers and things like that, but then I'll finally say, well, how many people here have been impacted by flooding, and no hands come up? And you realize, okay, well, this neighborhood has had zero impact, and this neighborhood has had zero impact. So while there are neighborhoods that have had massive impacts, and certainly in my district there are, a lot of them, I shouldn't say most of them, a lot of them haven't had it, and they're not really understanding why we're doing all this, because their view of Matthew is, man, it took me a long time to get to work that day because I had to reroute down this road. That's what people were telling me at the last Civic League meeting I was at, and it's very interesting. So I think you're right, Louis. I think that as the longer this gets away from a major storm, and I hope we get really far away from a major storm, but the longer this gets away from Matthew, I think the less appetite that folks are going to have for this. And I think you're right. I think this is something, and that's one of the things I said at the retreat as well, was that, we need to create a massive CIP project. This is that massive CIP project, and we got to figure out how to fund it. But, if money falls from the sky from the federal government, we're ready to take it. We'll have shovel-ready projects. We'll do like we did with the Lesnar Bridge, where we were ready. We took some of the Obama administration stimulus money and money we got from the state to build that project. These are a bunch of Lesnar Bridge projects that we're doing, and I think we can do that. So I'd say kudos to the staff for putting this together. But it's good information. But I completely agree with Louis on this.
Rosemary, then Barbara.
So there are people from Florence and Michael and Matthew and down in Puerto Rico, they're still waiting for federal funds that haven't gotten it. So the chances of us getting funding for a storm that hasn't happened, chances are not really very good. There are lots of people who are saying, well, you're not doing anything. And even though we get these quarterly reports, and we are, as Barbara and I have said, we're making progress and we are doing things, the public doesn't realize what we're doing. And there are areas that haven't been flooded. But question two is a couple of questions. If we do a referendum and it fails, what?
I wasn't talking about a referendum.
My view is the
No,
public.
I know you're
John
not.
was.
The question to me is, the public said, we want to accept the risk, and we should respond to that.
But let me finish. I didn't interrupt you.
I thought you were asking me a question.
No, I'm just
I'm sorry.
throwing the question out there. If it fails, then what? And then if we do nothing, and then the big storm comes and they say, you didn't do anything, we're really in a big problem.
Barbara?
I'm sort of the Lone Ranger here, as the only representative in the 66% of the city that drains to the south. And I know when the manager was talking about all of this long-range plan, that everybody's going to be paying for it. That's the problem. Everybody's going to be paying for it. And therefore, there's got to be a lot in here for everybody. And I've said this every time we've had a listing of these projects, and I don't know why we still only continue the projects that we started with, because those are the ones that, were identified as problem areas with Matthew. But there are a lot of other neighborhoods in the city that have problems and have needs, but they don't ever show up here. And when I look at this, I still see on the flood control project, taking out Asheville Park and Sherwood Lakes, I only see the Southern Canal lead ditch and culvert improvements for the whole southern part of the city. That's essentially Indian River South, nothing for that area above that to Providence Road or wherever. And then finally in 22, the Southern Rivers Watershed Stormwater Projects kicks in, but that doesn't have the big dollars until 29 and so forth. These real estate taxes and stormwater fee taxes are not going to be at all popular in areas that are not getting anything. And I remind you that down south, we don't just have the storms to worry about. We have tides that happen with strong southerly winds. And we had at least twice for several days last year with no storms, this is called sunny day flooding, that we had all of our evacuation routes closed because they were flooded. Tonga Ferry Road, West Neck Road, Indian River Road. We have nothing for any elevation of these roads or things of that nature. What we really need to understand is that we have two major watersheds that operate very differently. And when we put all the money in the northern watershed, I realize that's where the dollars are, that's where the tax dollars are, that's where most of the people are. But we've got 2/3 of the city that drains to the Albemarle, that operates differently. And I just don't see us beginning to understand that. I see a little bit more money put in the Southern Canal Lee ditch, maybe another $1 million per year. So it's 2.3 each year instead of 1.3. That's helpful, I appreciate that, but it's not touching the problems that are going on in the southern part of the city. And those folks know what flooding is. And when kids can't go to school, school buses can't run because the roads are closed, that's a real problem. And it's not talking about storms. It's talking about something that's going to start happening now as we get to the spring and the winds start going to the south more. I hope that it won't do as much as it has the past couple of years, but as long as I have lived down there, which is all my life, I've never seen all three of those evacuation routes closed at the same time. And I've seen it several times in the last 2 years, and it's kind of frightening to folks.
Okay, Shannon.
Thank you. While I appreciate and agree with Barbara's comments now, I do have to say I don't want us to take our eye off of this northern part and center part of our city that we've funded so heavily in my district, Princess Anne, Windsor Woods, the lakes, etc. Because even before I was appointed to council, during that interview process that I did, I said to you, South Plaza Trail floods all the time. It rains 5 minutes and there's water all over South Plaza Trail and you can't get through. So had we done the maintenance and the dredging and the things that we should have done for 50 years, we wouldn't have had the problem that we had in the magnitude that we had during Matthew. And that's like beating a dead horse. We all know that at this point, and we're playing catch up and we're getting it done. But while I agree, in the southern part of the city has its own set of problems that is unlike the rest of our city, please, I beg you, don't take our eye off of these projects in the center of the city, in the northern part of the city, because we've got to get, even if it's just the maintenance right now, we've got to get it all caught up and up to speed and fixed, because that's not a sea level rise or a Matthew problem. That's a human problem that we've got to fix it. And so I just wanted to say that.
Okay, anybody else at this point?
You might want to let Mark just kind of, we got the projects on the top sheet, and if you'll flip the page, I want to have Mark address the increase in O&M that I think has been a talking point at the retreat, as well as the fact that, look, we understand we got backlogs and we're in it, but would you please address how much money you're putting into this program?
Sure. If you look at O&M, second page, at the top, and go down to the bottom line, blue row, what you'll see is we're proposing to increase O&M in 2023, excuse me. We're going to hold it constant till we hit there, and then in 2026 we increase it again to 34.8 million all the way out. So we've got a strategy to continue on all our maintenance programs, beef them up even more so we can do more neighborhoods in 1 year. We can do more off-road ditching. We can do more canals in 1 year, and dredge more lakes in single years. we have to do it that way so we can still keep funding in between 20 and 2022 in water quality to keep those efforts going and also keep the flood control projects going. So we're really making a conscious effort to get flooding. And if you recall, on all my strategies, always funded O&M first. We're always going to do that. And then we have to do our regulatory responsibility, so we fund water quality, and then we figure out how we can fund the flood projects.
Okay. John?
So the backlog gets reduced in not 12 years, but 6, but not 6, but 4. What is the shrinkage from what we started, which was 12 when we adopted PB19, if I remember correctly?
Okay, on off-road ditches or canals or?
This was canal, if I remember,
Canals.
canals and ditches were a 12-year backlog with the adoption of the FY19. I think
Right.
I have emails to that effect.
Yes. We really start funding that in 2023 at $2 million. I think that's what we said in the email. We're going to fund it at $2 million. So that's when we would start addressing the backlog.
So the backlog wouldn't be addressed till 3 budget cycles out, or 4 budget cycles out?
Right.
That's going to need a turn. I don't know how we're going to do that, but that needs a turn there.
How we're doing it right now is we're addressing canals out of the lake dredging program.
Well, I guess I'm independent of the funding source. Let me retune my question. Independent of the funding source, in FY19, we had a 12-year backlog. With this 6-year fit up, what does that go to? Stays at 12, goes to 9, goes to 6? How? We're not pulling it, it stays the same? What is that
It
reduction?
stays the same right now.
So we're making no progress on
Over
that
the
at all?
6-year period?
No.
That's what I'm asking, the question I'm asking
No,
is.
we're doubling the amount, starting in '23. We've got a creep. We give it a surge in '20. We are committing a tremendous amount of this additional funds to the individual projects that design is being done. If we want to add more, if you want to add more resourcing, then take that on and you can commit 100% of whatever you want to add, another half cent to real estate to it, you can put it all into O&M.
Well, until we get the whole budget, we can't look to where it might come from. I'm just trying to understand the standard that we've had. And one of the things I know we've talked about often when we've got the individual pitches, and I think it's essential to this plan, is we know that FEMA is changing the basis by which they're going to charge people premiums. And that's just around the corner. And for some people, that's going to be a smile, but for most people, it's going to be a frown, I think. Because it's a whole different process. So I've always asked, as we do these projects and we get these in our policies and we get these point discounts, I think that you can't talk about, and I know, and Mr. City Manager, I know you understand all this. I'm just trying to make sure that we're all on the same playing field as we talk about communicating whatever ultimately the council adopts. But holistically, we can't make this distinct in terms of when you're buying this, you're not only buying the performance, which we aren't talking about here, but I know we will, what the improved performance is. How does this change it from a FEMA, how they rate those communities? And as we do these things, independent of individual projects, we change the community rating, the discounts to people who are paying more than that base rate. I realize if you get a base rate, you get no discount. I think that all has to be part of the communication, because if we don't do anything, I mean, people's house values are going to fall because of what the nature is. They shift this liability to the private sector and not subsidizing it with federal tax dollars, and you're going to pay the real actuarial liability of your property. That's going to make people think, woo, it's much easier to pay the tax than it is to pay the flood insurance premium. That's the point I'm getting to, and we just have to make that part, I think, of the holistic picture.
Right. As we complete projects, we're going to turn around and request amendments.
Okay, and FEMA knows all our plan, and we know what we have to show them, so we got all this down.
I know we've talked to them once.
Okay, that would be a great engagement with our local congressman.
And I'm also going to remind the council, I gave you a lead in, I can't tell you what it is, but during your budget cycle, the CRS is going to be announced, and it's healthy. Your program, your stormwater efforts to date are going to have a significant result in your initial determination by FEMA on our rates. And it is going to, you're going to smile, you're going to be very pleased with yourself, the effort And all this is gonna do nothing but add to that reduction and eliminate areas out of the floodplain as we block off the impacts of sea level rise.
Jess, then Barbara.
I had a question about the projects that we have listed on here. We haven't finished all the modeling yet, correct?
Correct.
So as far as unknown projects, how will those be added to this?
They'll come out of, if you look at flood control, we've got watershed projects where we have planted seed money. The seed money is taking the models and using them as a tool to do the analysis to identify future flood control projects in the watershed. In other words, in other neighborhoods. Once we identify those projects, we'll develop a scope and a cost estimate, and then we'll generate a CIP project for that specific, say, neighborhood.
I assume that those will just be added.
And they'll just be added in.
Okay, Barbara?
I'm
Okay.
sorry, I have one other question. As far as the ERU and the study that we're doing, when will council receive a briefing on what exactly, like a full scope of what we're looking at and how that's gonna be changing?
Okay.
We're in the process of doing it, probably another month or two. We would probably put together the straw man associated with this. We'd probably spend the summer doing additional analysis, and we'd be back in the fall to our goal is to try, I've given the guys the goal to try to deliver this briefing before we break for Christmas, so you can make some decisions with regards to mid-cycle, as John said, mid-cycle contemplation. We heard you loud and clear about the regressiveness. I'm telling you, as your manager, you cannot deliver this program without the ERU, plus real estate, plus reducing other CIPs to pay for this. This is an all hands on board, all efforts, everything going after the single largest investment infrastructure program ever contemplated in the city.
Ms. Henley?
The policy document, that, we got when we were getting the Dewberry report, and there's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't cost millions and billions, it's just policy, and I really think if we're going to start talking to people about their paying more, we're going to have to show them that we're going to be changing our way of doing things so that we don't keep making the same mistakes. When are we going to get the policy document recommendations?
Well,
We're probably, within May, Ms. Henley, we targeted to go out to the public to talk to them, so we can have that.
I think they need to hear some of that
Right.
before we tell them that they've got to pay a lot more money. Because I think if we want the folks to be at all agreeable with paying more money, we're going to have to show them that we're going to make some changes in our policies. I mean, I know that we might not be able to get them adopted, but I certainly think we need to be talking about these possible things that we can do or we plan to do that will help the situation.
Okay, if I can wrap up so we can get into executive. This is an overwhelming challenge that we have as a city, as a council, Barbara's right. The public has to be involved in this discussion in a big way. And, being kind of the new guy in this seat, it's going to be a challenge for myself. It's going to be a challenge for everybody in this table. It's going to be a challenge for our city staff. Kind of reminds me of the old Fram Oil commercial. Pay me now or pay me a heck of a lot later. Just saying, I don't think we have an option. We have to be decisive with this. We have to move forward with this. And for a lot of reasons, a lot of them, first and foremost, are the people that were adversely affected by the storms. Because a number of us have been in those homes that saw the carnage that it placed on their, not only their lifestyle, but their property values and everything. That's the number one priority. But we take it to the next step, and I think John alluded to it. This is also an economic thing, that we have to decisively demonstrate to not only the bond rating agencies, but to the public that we are being proactive and aggressive in dealing with this major problem that's going to affect our future. And the other thing too, and now that I look at life through a different prism these days, the military has a big stake in this to make sure that we have patent roads and lifestyles. When our economic development, when companies are looking to relocate to Virginia Beach, they're going to want to know that we are aggressively tackling this problem. So if they're going to move their company here and they're going to move their employees here, that is going to be a tangible benefit for them to do that. And we're going to need those new companies coming in to generate the new wealth that we're going to need to help pay for this stuff. So, but once again, the only option is we have no option but to move forward in a very positive and aggressive and unified way. And once again, to educate the public and bring them into the loop and tell them the necessity of the actions that we're going to have to take, whether we like it or not. We were dealt a very big wake-up call with Hurricane Matthew. And once again, I share with the concern that as time goes away from that we forget the priorities and realize that we're sinking in a way. We got sea level rise. We got multiple pronged problems going on here. So I think this discussion is healthy, but it's the first one. Let's have more of them. Let's find the funding resources. Let's have a meeting with our delegation after we finish the budget and convey to them the priorities of what's going to be necessary. We're going to need some help. We can't do this alone. But once again, I appreciate the discussion. I appreciate the honesty of the presentation. And let's move forward and confront, okay? Okay, at this point, if we can we go into city council comments? Rosemary.
I have two things. On Friday, we had a meeting on broadband with the 5 major cities that are involved in that, and we are moving forward on figuring out the governance of how we're going to deal with all 5 cities, and an attorney was brought in that has had a lot of experiences with dealing with that, and I believe that the 5 city managers are going to be sitting down and working out with the best program. There's different options. More than likely, it'll be an authority. So that's going to be coming forth. But it was a very, very good meeting. And the second thing I'd like to just mention is on Sunday, my Crush Cancer had its kickoff. We're going to be having our event May 5th. This will be our 5th year. We have raised over $5 million. And Andy Fox, who participates with us, and we have a challenge for Andy to see who can raise more money. Andy Fox are this beautiful 14-year-old girl that has a bone sarcoma, and she had to have her leg amputated. And she's amazing, brilliant. She went to Allenton Elementary. She would be at the gifted school at Kemp's Landing, but she's having to do online learning right now. She got up and spoke, and it was not a dry eye in the house. I think Andy is going to have his hands full with her. Her name is Michaela, and she is so smart that she went online and found the surgeon to amputate her leg at Memorial Sun Kettering. Wow. She's absolutely incredible. So it's going to be a great event. We'd love to have, anybody would like to do a team. It's an exciting event. It's indoor cycling. And it's a lot of fun to do, to raise money for a spectacular cause.
You do it at One Life or the mall?
We do it at One Life.
Very positive. Thank you very much. Sabrina?
Just want to say thank you to the council because for allowing that 2-week period of time regarding the TCC Hotel. And thank you also to the staff because last night we had the forum for the hotel, and it was a good turnout, and the city staff was able to convey an overview of the project, and then also Harmony Hospitality had an opportunity to address employment, One of the things that was interesting, they now have opportunities for tuition reimbursement for students at TCC. And so that's something good as a benefit that the citizens were able to learn. So it was a good informational session, and people were able to give feedback, ask questions. So I think it was a wonderful turnout and a wonderful opportunity for citizen engagement.
Oh, that was great.
So
That's
thank
good
you.
news. Thank you very much. Anybody else? John?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for letting Sabrina and I serve as liaison to the 2040 committee, and I know we're getting ready to meet with the chairman and vice chairman, but we wanted to make sure that we walked away from the retreat with what we thought we heard people telling us, because I'm not there to represent my own views. I'm here to represent what this council as a body wants to achieve, like I've done on that other committee I'm on. That's much tougher. But what we heard at the, well, say, what I heard, I don't want to infer what someone else, what I heard at the retreat is that we needed to re-baseline the 2040 report to reflect that the light rail didn't work. We need to have a different, what we're going to do with transit instead. I think, what's the next step for transit? One, we kind of heard we wanted to pull the timeline in a little bit to 2030 to align with our other things that we said. So that was the other part that we heard. And the reason why I mention that is because if you go to the city's website and you look up 2040, they're realigning our top 5 priorities to the 2040 report, the 2040 vision, when in reality, I think you were wanting us to redrive the vision to the priorities. Plus, I'm getting the verbatim of the thing that I missed when you all mentioned the other items, when I missed that 3-hour discussion. And we just wanted to make sure that that's what that was the general parameters. It's really for the group to fill in the dots, that we're not trying to do their job, but we just wanted to make sure that that was an alignment, that is still the general course, the compass heading that you wanted us to go with the group. Is that kind of true? That makes sense what you all said to retreat? That's all I'm trying to make sure that we got the right compass heading. Look, some head nods, so I'd say yes.
I'm not so sure we know what our vision is for 2030. I don't know what they're saying.
Well, what we hope to do, talking with the chairman and vice chairman, is not wait to the end. I generally find that not to be very productive, but maybe have quarterly come back and have incremental looks so you people can make sure that as we increase the number of pixels on that vision, that we get the right adjustment, make sure we have the right colors and the right shapes, so that we're not getting at the end and saying, this isn't what we were expecting. We're trying to avoid that, much like the city manager often tries to do as well. It's not easy, but I think it's the best way ahead. I also wanted to let people know that I had asked the city attorney, because the city manager knows this, to look at the legal authority. You know, we all got this memo from the city manager with regards to these 3 parking permits down at 43rd Street and whatnot. You know, I won't mention people's names because that's not important here, but the people.
Yeah.
Yes, and questioning whether or not under the legal authority to really grant a de facto lease is really vested in those state codes. The city attorney is looking at that, and when he gives me a written opinion, I know he's going to share it with all of you. And based upon what that is, I think there would be worthy of having a discussion about where those kind of decisions should be made in the future, and whether or not the decisions that were actually made are in fact legal decisions. So I just want to let you know that I had asked that question, and that the city attorney is researching that. I'm putting no pressure on time because he's got a lot of things on his plate, but I wanted you to know that question was being asked.
Okay, thank you. Okay, at this point, if we can go to agenda review.
Okay, under ordinances and resolutions, we have no speakers on any of these items. Does anybody have an issue for anything under paragraph J?
Yes.
All right, John?
I'm voting no on 5, but I'll give my reason at the outset, and I'm voting no on 4. I'll give my reason.
You're going to beat no on 4 and 5.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else?
On your add-on,
Get into that. Okay.
I have information for you when you get to that, if I may be
I'm there.
recognized.
I'm
Okay.
there.
I have been made aware, as we were sitting here, the counsel for Mr. Nygaard has filed a motion for reconsideration with a 3-judge panel. Now, I don't think, my recommendation to you is that that doesn't change anything. Just as we took no action, this body took no action until the order was entered, the court speaks through its order has been entered. It is the order of the court until the court itself says it is not. I am not commenting on the validity of any of the positions argued in the motion to reconsideration. I haven't had a time to look at them carefully, but I will tell you as a general proposition that motions to reconsider are seldom taken up and even more rarely granted. So my recommendation is to proceed as you discussed earlier in the day, but I felt I owed it to you to give you that factual information.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then, Mark, so just before we do this, the consent agenda, we'll entertain a motion to, or I'll move to add this resolution to the agenda, and then we'll do it on consent.
You would vote to add it to
So we'll have
the
a separate
agenda, and then you would
supermajority
read
vote.
it as part of the consent agenda. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay, under planning, Clear Creek Holdings LLC, conditional change of zoning from R10 residential and I1 light industrial to conditional I1 light industrial, a vacant parcel off South Bird Neck Road, 608 feet from Carissa Court, regarding constructing 3 buildings for industrial office warehouse units, Beach District. This has been deferred. Does anybody have?
I have a question. I know that, I think it was you, maybe it was David, but I don't remember that there was gonna be some community outreach on this.
They had a meeting.
Okay.
He told me when he met with me right before all this happened. I don't know the outcome. It seemed to me that everybody was.
We have a speaker on it? Is it been deferred?
No, we have no speakers.
Oh, there
I think
will be.
I think there will be.
There's right.
We'll hear this
No
one.
one signed up at this point.
You want
He's right
one or
here.
two? Which one?
A1.
K1, okay.
Hi, Andrew.
All
Are
right.
you speaking tonight? That was my question.
I have on reliable hearsay that the applicant.
That's kind of an
Reliable
oxymoron.
hearsay. That's pretty good. I'm writing that down.
That the applicant is likely to request modification to some of the conditions. Is that?
Yeah, they're talking about doing a.
Heard again.
So should it be deferred?
Well,
till we know what
if the proffers are being modified, it would have to be,
they are?
All right.
The
we got a
conditions would have to be
speaker,
provided to
So
the-
we're going to hear this
We'll
one.
hear it and then possibly defer it for 30 days? Is that what we need, or?
Okay. Item K2, Janet T. Respass and Teresa Tatum for variance to section 4.4B of the subdivision regulations regarding lot width at 1965 Gumbridge Road, Princess Anne District.
I've made my comments before and my concerns. I've heard no opposition, so I guess it can be on the condition.
I'm abstaining. I have a letter.
Okay, K3, CNC Development Incorporated, ETC PAC LLC, for special exception for alternative compliance of the Ocean Front Resort District Form-Based Code regarding lot width, lot area, and parking setbacks, 2508 Pacific Avenue, 302 26th Street, Beach District.
I have a question on that one. What did we just planning here, what did we end up with on the number of parking spaces that this has? Did we
Maybe
have
we want to
adequate?
hear it. I
I
would
think
really
I would
like
like
to hear it
as well,
presented.
because this thing has a lot of problems.
I had a lot of problems with it, except it does have a 2-car garage.
I think that's what we said.
But when you go down to the site
in
and
one
try to
space.
think of what that's like to drive
I
in
know,
there. And then
I
it's, I
All
think
right,
it's.
so do we want to hear it?
Well, yeah, I think.
Yeah, let's hear it.
mean, I didn't like it,
Okay.
and I struggled with it, and then, but each unit has a 2-car garage, which helped me a little bit, but
And then the one space, right? 2 cars and then the one
Right.
space, wasn't it?
Okay, actually, if you said condition couldn't be registered as a short-term rental, the project would go
One-
away
Okay.
for lack
one
of
point
financing.
something.
1.3.
The .3 is the on the
1.3.
road.
All right.
The
we-
and the RAC did look at it extensively, and they recommended it.
Okay. Item K4 for Virginia Beach Development Authority for conditional change of zoning from conditional B2 community business to conditional I1 light industrial, conditional I1 light industrial to conditional B2 community business at the corner of Corporate Landing Parkway and General Booth Boulevard, Princess Anne District.
I've heard no opposition, so,
I'm voting no. On 4, right?
yes.
K4. Also no. Okay, item K5, Traditional Concepts LLC and Victory Baptist Church of Virginia Beach Incorporated for conditional change of zoning from R15 residential to conditional R10 residential regarding 13 single-family dwellings and a modification of conditions regarding religious use at 4125 Indian River Road, Princess Anne.
I've heard no opposition.
That's it.
Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exceptions from open meetings allowed by section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes: Publicly held property. Discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiation strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 Beach District. Personnel matters, discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of any public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1. Council appointees, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees, and evaluation of appointees. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Call the roll, please.
Jones.
Aye.
Finley. Mr. Moss.
Aye.
Ms. Abbott. Aye. Mr. Rouse. Aye. Ms. Wooten.
Aye.
Ms. Kane.
Aye.
Wilson. Aye. Vice Mayor Wood. Mayor Dyer.
Aye.
And Zebo.
Okay, if we can get the cameras off.